I married the man I deeply loved, and we finally became the couple I had always dreamed of. To make it even more perfect, we were having a beautiful wedding ceremony, surrounded by the blessings of family and friends. I felt so happy, thinking that even my parents, who had passed away, would be smiling from above. But I had no idea that a terrible event was waiting for me. I will never forgive those who ruined everything, and I am determined to get back at them. My name is Mary. When I was 27, my boyfriend Thomas, who is 2 years older, proposed to me. My father had died when I was young, and my mother passed away from illness 2 years ago. During my hardest times, Thomas supported me both physically and emotionally. We got married on the anniversary of our 2.5 years together, starting our happy life as newlyweds. Since Thomas was busy with work, we decided to wait until his schedule cleared up before holding the wedding ceremony. On his days off, we went to the wedding venue and started planning for the big day. We set the date and began making the guest list. I thought about inviting my aunt and uncle, who had been like parents to me after my father passed away. They brought me meals when my mother was busy working, kept me company so I wouldn't feel lonely, and helped with chores when my mother became sick. Even when things were difficult, they were always there for me, giving me hope. My aunt would reassure me, saying, "Your mom will get better, just believe and wait for her." Because of all they had done, I wanted them to sit in the family section on the bride's side at my wedding, so I visited them to tell them this. When I arrived, my aunt greeted me warmly, with tears in her eyes, saying, "Mary, congratulations on your marriage." I thanked her and then asked if they would sit in the family seats at my wedding. She agreed happily and then brought out a large box. "Mary, open this," she said. Inside was a beautiful, pure white wedding dress, made from elegant silk. It was a perfect mix of style and sweetness. The neckline was lined with delicate lace, and the dress had a lovely A-line shape with floral embroidery along the hem. It was clear that this dress had been custom-made just for me. Stunned, I asked, "Why, how did you get this?" My aunt explained that my mother had made it herself. Despite her illness, my mother had worked on this dress, sewing it day by day to fit my petite frame. She had asked my aunt to give it to me if I ever got married. This dress was filled with all the love my mother had left, created just for me in her final days. "Mary dear, you must wear this dress at your wedding. Your mother would be so pleased," my aunt said, her eyes filling with tears and a warm smile on her face. Her words touched me deeply, and I felt tears in my own eyes. "Thank you, Auntie, for keeping it safe all this time. I promise I'll wear this dress at my wedding. You have to come and see me in it," I replied, holding the dress my mother had lovingly made. When I got home, I hung the dress on my bedroom wall and looked at it with determination. I was set on making my wedding a success, wearing this dress in memory of my mother. The feeling only grew stronger as the days went by. Then one day, disaster struck. I came home from work and noticed that the dress, which should have been hanging on my wall, was gone. "What? It's gone? Why? I left it right here." I panicked and pulled out my phone to call the police. Just then, my husband walked in. "Oh, Mary, what's wrong?" he asked, seeing my tears and sensing something was wrong. My dress is gone. I had it hanging right here. I think someone stole it," I cried, but his reaction took me by surprise. "Oh, is that it?" he said casually. "What do you mean, Thomas? Do you know something?" I asked, confused. His answer shocked me. "Of course, my sister said she's getting married soon and wanted to borrow your dress." "What?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Yes, I mentioned the dress to her, and she asked if she could borrow it. I thought it'd be fine, so I agreed." She came over and picked it up, using the spare key from our mailbox. He had lent my precious wedding dress to his sister without even asking me. I felt anger building up inside me. "What the hell, Thomas? That dress was handmade by my mother, specifically for me. Didn't I tell you that? It's perfectly tailored to my size. How could you lend it out without asking?" "Calm down," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "It's not like it's a one-time use thing. You can still wear it. What's the big deal? Our wedding is still a while away, and my sister was happy she wouldn't have to buy a dress." I was furious. "That's not the point. I never gave permission for this. That dress is special. It was meant for me to wear first. Why would you let your sister wear it before I even get to?" Even after all my explanations, he still didn't seem to understand my feelings. I tried to explain why I was so upset, but my husband refused to apologize or even admit he was wrong. Instead, he sighed in frustration and said, "Mary, you're being too petty. Stop acting like a spoiled child. Petty? Spoiled? I thought, anger flaring up inside me. I was upset because this dress was something my mother had made for me. It was meant for me, not for my sister-in-law. I was done with his careless comments that completely dismissed my feelings. I'm going to your parents' house tomorrow to get my dress back from your sister, I said firmly. What, tomorrow? My sister's fiancé and his parents are coming over then, he said, sounding annoyed. Don't interrupt them. Interrupt? You've got some nerve. Let me be clear, no one will convince me to let your sister wear that dress, I replied. The next day, I took off work and went to my in-laws' house. As I walked up to the open front door, I could hear lively voices inside, quietly stepping in. I listened from nearby. Wow, you made this dress yourself? That's amazing, Cynthia, said a man's voice, who I assumed was Cynthia's fiancé. Oh, it's nothing like that, she replied, pretending to be humble. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was flaunting my mother's handmade wedding dress, claiming it as her own. It took a lot of time, but I really wanted my dream dress for my wedding, so I ended up making it myself, she continued. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Her dream dress? This was the dress my mother had poured her love into, just for me. Before I even realized it, I had walked into the room and grabbed the dress from my sister-in-law's hands. This is mine, I shouted, my voice shaking with anger. Everyone turned to me, startled. My father-in-law looked shocked and asked, "Whoa, Mary, what's going on?" Ignoring him, I looked straight at Cynthia and revealed the truth to everyone. This dress was handmade by my mother, just for me. Your daughter took it from my room without asking. Everyone stared at me in disbelief, their eyes wide. Cynthia, on the other hand, looked pale. Cynthia, is this true? Her fiancé asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Desperate to cover it up, Cynthia tried to protest. No, it's not like that. I really did make this myself. I realized we wouldn't get anywhere with more arguing, so I challenged her. Why don't you try it on then? Since my mother made it to fit me, I don't think it will fit you. Cynthia was taller and more toned than I was. There was no way the dress would fit her. Cynthia was trying her best to fit into the dress, which was clearly made for my smaller frame. Just then, my husband arrived, his face red with anger. Mary, what are you doing? Are you trying to ruin my sister's wedding? He shouted. What are you talking about? I shot back. If anyone's wedding is being ruined, it's mine. Ignoring my frustration, he went on to say something even more shocking. Shut up, we cancelled our wedding, so just give the dress to my sister. Cancelled? What do you mean? I asked, stunned. That's right, he replied firmly. My sister said she's short on money, so we gave her the $50,000 we'd saved for our wedding. Since there's no wedding anymore, we don't need the dress, right? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He had lent my dress to his sister without asking, cancelled our wedding, and even gave away our savings. It was as if our marriage meant nothing to him. Realizing how little he valued us, I felt my love for him fading. Seeing my silence, he assumed he had won. Now, give that dress back to my sister, he demanded. You have no objections to canceling, right? Fine, I replied calmly. Let's get a divorce then. Huh? My husband looked completely taken aback. You heard me, I want a divorce. I can't be with someone who tramples on people's feelings so easily, I said firmly. Wait, what? Divorce? That's ridiculous, he stammered, panicked. But I was done. I turned to leave, holding the dress tightly. Just then, Cynthia grabbed the end of the dress, pulling it hard. The dress tore, leaving it in a ruined state. My husband and Cynthia burst out laughing as if they found it hilarious. Serves you right, Mary, she sneered. This wouldn't have happened if you'd just lent me the dress quietly. You brought this on yourself. I felt tears fill my eyes, not because the wedding was cancelled, but because this precious dress, made by my mother, was now destroyed. It was something I wanted to keep forever, and now these awful people had ruined it. At that moment, Cynthia's fiancé stood up and spoke quietly. I guess we're done, too. Everyone turned to look at him in shock. Wait, are you serious? Cynthia cried, panicking. You're calling off our engagement? Why? He looked at her with a stern, disappointed expression. Why? It's simple. I can't marry someone who would do something so thoughtless and cruel without hesitation. Even his parents seemed to share his disappointment, looking at her with quiet disapproval. As Cynthia's fiancé and his parents were getting ready to leave, Cynthia frantically yelled, "Wait a minute, It's ridiculous to end our engagement over something like this, right, Mom, Dad, don't you agree? But her pleas didn't change anything. Her parents just looked at her with disappointment. Wait, Mom, Dad, why are you looking at me like that? She asked, panicking. Her father suddenly shouted, "Get out, you're a disgrace." Even Cynthia, usually so confident, began to cry under his harsh words. "You're so cruel, this is too much," she sobbed. "Stop crying," her father said. "I didn't raise someone who could treat others' feelings so carelessly. I don't even recognize you as my daughter right now." As Cynthia broke down in tears, my husband tried to step in. "Dad, Mom, please don't be so hard on her. She didn't mean it that way." But his father turned on him as well. "You too, Thomas? You completely disregarded Mary's feelings. Get out of this house along with Cynthia, you foolish son." Stunned, my husband just stood there, speechless. He had never expected his own parents to turn against him. Then my mother-in-law came over to me, bowing her head in apology. "I'm so sorry, Mary. We believed our daughter when she said she'd made the dress herself. We had no idea." "It's okay," I replied, trying to stay calm, "but I can't stay married to Thomas anymore." "That's understandable," she said gently. "It's our daughter's fault, and we don't want you to worry about this any longer. Go on and live your life in peace." Her words touched me deeply. My in-laws had always been very kind to me, and I knew this was hard on them too. I felt a bit guilty that things had come to this, but I knew I couldn't stay with Thomas anymore. "Mary, I'm sorry, let's have a real wedding, just don't file for divorce yet," he pleaded, realizing how serious things were only after being disowned by his parents. But I was done. I couldn't go back to someone who had shown me such disrespect. "I'll live my own life. I can be happy without you," I replied firmly. Hearing this, Thomas collapsed to his knees in defeat. After thanking my in-laws for their kindness, I left their house. I packed my things and moved to my aunt's house. She was surprised by everything that happened, but she respected my feelings and welcomed me with open arms. My aunt even managed to mend the torn parts of my mother's dress, bringing it back to its original beauty. After that, I filed for divorce and requested alimony from Thomas. Since he had secretly given our wedding savings to his sister, I was able to get a bit more because of that. Since being disowned, my ex-husband and sister-in-law are now living together in the home we once shared. My sister-in-law, who had planned to be a housewife after marriage, is now unemployed, and Thomas has to cover both of their expenses. In the future, if I ever get another chance to marry, I'll be sure to choose my partner carefully, and when I do have that wedding, I'll proudly wear my mother's handmade wedding dress.
I'm all set for life marrying into wealth. While you continue to struggle in your modest existence, Bob jeered with a smirk, throwing condescending words my way. His shrill voice pierced the air, disrupting my relaxing break in the hotel lobby. I wondered where he had met his new wife, a president's daughter, no less. Julie, the daughter of Johnson Enterprises. Bob, with his middle-aged man's laugh, seemed oddly proud, but the mention of Johnson Enterprises caught my attention. It sounded familiar, but which company was it? Ah, yes, I recalled the details about Johnson Enterprises, and a proud smile spread across Bob's face. Meanwhile, I struggled to suppress a laugh bubbling up inside me. My name is Amy. I'm 35 and living with my husband Bob. I work in my family's real estate business, handling mostly administrative tasks. My father, the president, manages the key business strategies. Being an only child, I'm expected to eventually take over the company. With older executives at the helm, I feel the pressure of one day becoming the president. However, I've been careful not to discuss much about our family business with Bob, who only finished high school and works in a moving company. I don't want to bring work matters home, and Bob, feeling somewhat inferior, avoids the topic. Of course, moving is a tough job requiring physical strength and skill, a job for professionals. I don't mind that he only has a high school diploma, but I understand his feelings, so I avoid mentioning my prestigious university degree or my future role as president in our daily conversations. Bob and I met through a friend's introduction in college. My friend had hired Bob's moving company, and he was in charge of her move. Initially interested in my friend, Bob was turned down, but they got along, so she introduced him to me. Our unusual meeting turned out well, as Bob's carefree nature was a good match for my meticulous personality. After several dates, we became a couple in my late 20s, and at the right age for marriage, our relationship quickly led to marriage within a year. Thus began my life as Bob's wife. Our married life started without any issues. Bob's parents were incredibly kind, always welcoming me with smiles during our visits. Considering the common mother-in-law issues among my friends, I felt lucky to have such a harmonious relationship with my in-laws. However, Bob's demanding job often kept him out until late, physically taxing and leaving him exhausted. Despite his fatigue, he never neglected our marital life. While appreciative, I often thought he didn't need to try so hard. Thanks for always waiting up for me. Bob would thank me for simply preparing dinner after his long workdays. I felt blessed to have such a wonderful husband, but our peaceful days began to waver a year into our marriage. Hey, why can't we have kids? One night as we got into bed, Bob casually brought up the subject, his tone slightly irritated. It took me by surprise. I had thought about having children too, and although we weren't actively trying, given our regular marital life, I believed it would happen in time. It's just bad timing. We've only been married a year, so it's not something to worry about yet. I reassured him. I definitely wanted children, but knew that rushing wouldn't help. To reassure Bob, I deliberately adopted a relaxed tone and said, "It's still okay, huh? Don't you know for couples not using contraception, there's about an 80% chance of conceiving within a year?" Bob, more forceful than usual, even quoted percentages, 80% within a year. Not well versed in pregnancy statistics, that number seemed incredibly high to me. Really? If you're that eager for kids, should we get tested together? I thought it best to identify and address any clear issues. I proposed that both of us undergo fertility tests, but Bob's response caught me off guard. "What are you talking about? Are you implying it's my fault?" Infertility issues are usually the woman's fault. There's no point in me getting tested. Bob's contemptuous tone, a first for him, stunned me. I hadn't accused him of being the cause. I simply suggested testing since we didn't know where the issue lay yet. However, Bob jumped to the conclusion that I was blaming him and added, "It's definitely the woman's fault," as if to say I was the problem. I wanted to say more, but I was shaking, barely able to reply. Of course, I managed to say, "So just you get tested. I'm too busy with work. I have a job too. You're just a placeholder office lady, right? Just coasting along in a company thanks to your dad's connections." I never just coast at my company. Sure, I do a lot of administrative work now, but I'm also learning management skills from my father for when I take over the company. I'm constantly trying to prove myself, and it's tough dealing with the higher-ups. Bob just doesn't understand my struggles. That night, it seemed pointless to argue with him. Any word I said was met with sharp retorts, and we went to sleep back-to-back in a heavy atmosphere. From that day on, Bob's attitude towards me changed completely. "I'm home." "What? Dinner's not ready yet? What time do you think it is? Can't have kids. Can't do housework. What a useless wife." One evening, after a late talk with my father about the future, I came home to find Bob berating me for not having dinner ready. "I'm sorry, I just got home 10 minutes ago. I'll start cooking now." "Just wait a little, please," I hurriedly explained. Bob muttered, "That's typical of a small company's boss's daughter." He didn't know, but my father's real estate company was not small at all, with hundreds of employees. But I knew arguing this point was meaningless. "I'll cook right away, have a drink, and wait." Bob loved his alcohol. It seemed to calm him down. Relying on alcohol to maintain our relationship felt sad. I hated being berated by him, but if alcohol could soothe him even a bit, then it was worth it. The next morning, Bob's mood hadn't improved. "Make sure dinner's ready when I get home," he spat as he left. I sighed, thinking about my plans for the day. I had taken the day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, as previously mentioned by Bob. Although I was the one who initially suggested the testing, the fact that only I was undergoing it while Bob refused was something I found hard to accept. But complaining wouldn't change anything. If the issue was with me, I needed to start infertility treatment promptly. Bob had been wanting kids, and I too hoped for a child soon. I knew fertility rates differ between the 20s and 30s, so sooner was better for treatment. The clinic was busier than expected, and I was called in for examination an hour after registration. After undergoing a physical examination and blood tests, I was told that the results would be available during my next visit. It would be a shock if the issue was with me, but I was prepared for any necessary steps, no matter the outcome. I resolved not to lose heart. Bob, I went for the fertility test today. When Bob came home from work, I informed him about the test. Figures. If the problem's with you, testing's the right thing to do. Let me know the results as soon as you get them, he said. Bob's belief that I was the cause of our infertility frustrated me. The fertility testing required much time and effort, and a bit of understanding from him would have been welcome. 5 years passed, and I turned 35. Though we continued our efforts to conceive, we remained childless, and Bob seemed to have given up on having a child with me. His late nights increased, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When asked, he said he was out drinking with colleagues, then singing karaoke till morning. His behavior was more akin to a college student and deeply exasperated me. My work had become busier, and the thought of starting a family was pushed aside. But Bob's recent actions were too much. His lack of concern for our home life was clear. One day, after Bob went out on his day off, I observed that he had left his smartphone in the living room, forgetting to take it with him. With that realization, I picked up Bob's phone, intending to take it to his room. It was at that moment that his phone rang, an incoming call from a certain Julie, as indicated by the caller ID. Assuming it was a work contact, I answered to inform them that Bob had forgotten his phone at home. "Hey, Bob, you're late. I've been waiting for 30 minutes. Where are you? If you don't hurry, we'll miss the park opening." The flirty voice on the phone made me catch my breath. "Can you hear me? Hurry up, okay? We haven't had a date in so long." The mention of a date shook me, and I quickly ended the call. My heart wouldn't stop racing. Who was this woman? She mentioned a date, so she likely wasn't a colleague. He's cheating on me. Holding undeniable proof of Bob's infidelity, I clenched his phone tightly. Julie had said it was a long-awaited date, indicating a long-term affair. I trembled with indescribable anger. While I was struggling with infertility, Bob was carelessly cheating on me. His recent distance now made sense. He no longer needed me. Unforgivable. Determined to make Bob pay, I started collecting evidence of his infidelity. It wasn't hard to gather proof. First, I easily unlocked his smartphone using his birth date. The call history was filled with Julie's name. When I opened the messaging app, I found numerous messages between Bob and Julie, filled with embarrassingly affectionate words that made me feel nauseated. I took photos of these pieces of evidence with my phone. After placing Bob's phone back in his room, I spent the day as if nothing had happened. After a month of a strange marriage, my father, the company president, summoned me to his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said gravely. Shocked by his words, I couldn't believe what I heard. "Is that true?" I asked. "Yes, so I'm counting on you." Disturbed, I returned to my office, barely concentrating on work. That evening, Bob suggested we separate. Having found evidence of his affair, I had been contemplating when to bring up divorce, but him initiating it saved me the hassle. "Yes, let's divorce." "Really?" Because I had readily accepted the divorce, Bob seemed surprised. Perhaps he was happy about being able to be with his mistress, a woman named Julie. His face was filled with an unmistakable joy that I found irritating. Despite my irritation with Bob's expression, I signed the divorce papers he offered. "I can file these tomorrow. I'll be leaving this house." "Okay. Are you sure about the mortgage?" I anticipated he would want me to leave, so I casually asked. "Oh yes, I'm fine." Bob's job was demanding but not high-paying. I doubted he could handle the mortgage alone. But since he initiated the divorce and was the one cheating, I felt no obligation to help. I packed and left the house 3 days later, moving back to my parents' house nearby. My parents initially seemed concerned when I told them about my divorce. But when I explained that Bob had cheated on me, they became furious. They repeatedly reassured me that it was the right decision to part ways with such a man. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about Bob. Before I realized it, a year had flown by. I was so engrossed in my work that I lost sight of everything else. It was astonishing. One day, while relaxing in the living room, my dad approached me. "Why don't you take a break and go on a trip? It's going to get busy starting next month." Guess he thought I'd been working too hard and needed a distraction. Indeed, I had been overwhelmed with various things lately and felt mentally exhausted. Thinking a little trip wouldn't hurt, I took up Dad's suggestion and decided to travel to the Northeast. It was my first solo trip, and I was both nervous and excited. The air in the Northeast was crisp and seemed to cleanse my weary soul. Interacting with the locals who helped me navigate and chatting with the owner of a bar, I found everyone to be incredibly kind, which gradually healed my spirit. I had booked a hotel in Seattle, the most famous and largest around here, thinking, why not enjoy the trip to the fullest? After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink. The fatigue from the journey seemed to melt away, feeling utterly comfortable. Jokingly considering moving to Seattle, a familiar voice called out, "Ha! Hey, what are you doing here?" I spun around, startled by the unmistakable voice of my ex-husband, Bob, entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases and a young woman in her early 20s. She had flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails, despite the chilly Northeast weather. Wearing a short skirt with bare legs, I stared at Bob and the woman in disbelief, unable to contain my curiosity. "Why are you here, and who is she?" I blurted out, even though I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. "Oh, let me introduce you. This is Julie, my new wife. We're on our honeymoon. Guess what?" "She's a wealthy businessman's daughter," Bob exclaimed, appearing genuinely happy and volunteering information I hadn't asked for. However, the name Julie struck a chord, the same name as the person on the phone. Disgusted that he was with such a young girl, I felt a surge of discomfort. "You're on a solo trip here. That's pathetic," Bob sneered, despite being the one who cheated and initiated our divorce. Julie, too, was looking at me with narrowed eyes, her tone carrying amusement. "Hey, Bob, is this your ex-wife? She looks old. Hurry up with the check-in." Irritated by her catty tone, I glared at Julie. Bob nonchalantly wrapped an arm around her waist, responding, "Yeah, I'm set for life marrying into money. You can keep struggling in your poor life." Bob's high-pitched voice echoed through the hotel lobby, disrupting the elegant atmosphere I was enjoying and leaving me feeling upset. His mention of marrying a businessman's daughter made me wonder where he had met someone like that. "Yeah, Julie is the daughter of Johnson Enterprises," Bob proudly stated, his middle-aged laugh seeming childishly proud to me. I pondered, feeling that Johnson Enterprises sounded familiar. After a moment, I recalled it. "Oh right, that company." Bob's face lit up with pride. "Impressive, huh?" he explained. However, I was secretly holding back laughter inside. "Come on, you know this company. Her family's loaded, and they even paid off the mortgage on that house quickly. Thanks for divorcing me so easily, Amy." His tone was dripping with sarcasm, but it didn't bother me at all. "Yeah, I know them. They're in the biggest building downtown, right? I've seen it and even been there," I replied calmly. "Oh, you've been there?" Bob seemed surprised. "It's quick then. Her family owns a huge company, so they're loaded. Breaking up with you was the right choice." Bob smirked nastily, but I simply nodded, still calm. "That building, it's part of our real estate holdings," I mentioned casually, as if I just remembered. Bob and Julie both asked in unison, "What do you mean by our real estate?" "That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office. I don't know if your company is involved in real estate, but it's not a shabby building," I explained calmly. Both seemed skeptical of my words. I hesitated for a moment, but there was no turning back now. Telling Bob about my company wasn't my concern anymore. "Yes, I know how grand it is. I was there when my father bought that building. It was about $200 million, I think. But recently, Dad was complaining about a tenant not paying their rent. Turns out it was your company. In fact, my father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $3.2 billion. The building Johnson Enterprises is in is one of them. The tenants of the building change regularly, but currently it's Johnson Enterprises. For the past few months, they hadn't paid their rent, and that's what was troubling my father. Rent not paid. Julie looked shocked, but then she burst out laughing. That can't be true. Our company's doing great. We can surely pay the rent. I'm not falling for such a lame lie to drive a wedge between Bob and me. Her shrill voice echoed in my ears. I let out a deep sigh. It seemed like a reasonable conversation with this woman was impossible. Pulling out my smartphone right there, I decided to call my dad. Dad, I'm here with the daughter of Johnson Enterprises. Can you send me a photo of the reminder notice for the rent? I quickly relayed my request, and Dad sent a photo of the rent reminder notice for Johnson Enterprises. Showing it to Bob and Julie, I doubted they could suspect it was fake, given the speed. See, you can tell, right? 3 months of unpaid rent. If you don't pay soon, we might have to sue. What are you going to do? At the mention of a lawsuit, Bob and Julie's faces turned pale. Come to think of it, Dad has been really on edge lately, yelling about sales and firing a lot of employees. Julie mumbled, sounding unsure. Seeing her, Bob shouted in despair, Lies. You're just trying to trick us and tear Julie and me apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person, trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty. Startled by Bob's loud voice, I took a step back, hearing Bob's accusations of dirty tactics. Memories of all the heartless words he had hurled at me during our marriage flooded back. Determined to confront Bob, who was now gloating about marrying Julie, a wealthy businessman's daughter, I prepared myself to tell him the truth. What are you even saying? Do you really think I still have feelings for you? How foolish. I've long been fed up with a man like you. In fact, I've been feeling sorry for Julie, who got caught up with you. Did you marry her just for her money? You married me for shallow reasons too, like wanting to get married quickly or wanting kids. And who was it that left me when he found out we couldn't have kids? Who insulted me, calling me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it, yet you think I still like you. You must be out of your mind. I unleashed my pent-up frustrations on Bob, feeling a wave of relief. Bob, on the other hand, seemed infuriated, trembling with anger. You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Julie and I were planning to have fun making a baby after this trip, and now you're accusing Johnson Enterprises of not paying rent. Panicked upon realizing the poor performance of Johnson Enterprises, Bob was desperate to blame all his misfortunes on me, deciding to deliver the final blow. I calmly said, "Oh, I didn't mention it, but I'm 4 months pregnant. I'm in the stable phase of my pregnancy, so Dad suggested I take this trip to relax. Of course, I have my doctor's permission." That's right. After divorcing Bob, I had found a new love, my boss at work and a subordinate of my father. He supported me mentally when I was struggling, encouraged me at work, and fully supported me. I found out I was pregnant with his child just 3 months ago. Knowing about the baby, I immediately married him. It was a quick marriage, but the company celebrated it grandly. My pregnancy was going smoothly, and encouraged by my father and husband, I embarked on this trip. And just before breaking up with Bob, my father had told me he was retiring as CEO next month. He decided to retire after being diagnosed with diabetes and thinking it was time to step down. Therefore, I would inherit my father's assets. This made it easier for me to accept the divorce from Bob. Even without Bob, I knew I could live a full life. The word pregnant slipped effortlessly from my lips, leaving Bob shouting, "What? You're pregnant? So, were you using birth control when we were married? What's going on?" Bob stomped his feet in complete confusion. "Birth control? I never did that. Remember, I told you I had infertility tests at the clinic, and they found no issues. So the problem was with you. Too bad." As I bluntly told this to Bob, his face twisted visibly. The problem was with me? Does that mean Julie and I can't have kids? Why did I divorce you and marry Julie? Bob muttered to himself, shoulders slumped in defeat. What do you mean? Why? I felt betrayed, knowing he was infertile. Julie snapped, angry at Bob's selfish reasoning. Realizing I couldn't bother with them anymore, I said my final words. That's why from now on, please don't involve yourself with me and Julie. Regarding the rent for Johnson Enterprises, I won't back down until it's fully paid. If you plan to continue renting that building, please pay the overdue rent soon. Otherwise, we'll have to take legal action. I have nothing more to save you two, so goodbye. I left Bob and Julie arguing and confidently walked back to my hotel room. After returning from my trip, my husband greeted me with a smile, saying, "Welcome back. Sorry I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay?" Of course, it was fine. I'm glad you got to relax, Amy. Thank you. My husband smiled warmly at me, and I felt a great sense of relief. Since marrying my current husband, I've been reassured every day, completely forgetting about Bob. Since that trip, I haven't met Bob. The following is what I heard through my father's contacts. After that incident, Bob and Julie's fights became incessant. Despite thinking he was marrying into wealth, Bob discovered Johnson Enterprises was in deep debt. Coincidentally, news was all over TV about a Johnson Enterprises employee embezzling millions of dollars from clients. Julie's father knew about the fraud, but tried to cover it up for the company's reputation. However, once the scandal became public, Johnson Enterprises' stock plummeted, having lost its credibility. The company saw a mass exodus of employees. In such a state, they couldn't possibly pay the rent, so my father was taking legal action against Johnson Enterprises. The future of the company looked bleak, entirely Johnson Enterprises' fault. Bob, having lost a fortune he thought was within his grasp, was furiously blaming everyone but himself. Thinking he could ride on the coattails of wealth was overly optimistic of Bob. Julie, realizing Bob was infertile, accused him of marriage fraud. Furthermore, after our hotel encounter, I had a lawyer demand compensation from Bob for his infidelity, leaving both him and Julie in debt. I heard that Bob and Julie ended up arguing every time they saw each other, and they finally got divorced recently. Then, unbelievably, Bob called me after divorcing Julie. "Amy, please marry me again. I have debts." Other than the alimony, Julie made me buy everything she wanted and then left without paying a dime. "You're the only one I can rely on. I'll do anything for you. Please forgive me." Bob's pleas, sounding like a beggar, were so pitiful that they almost made me sick. His unchanged attitude of marrying for money was just appalling. "No, I have no desire to be involved with you ever again. I'm going to be happy with my husband and our child, so please don't contact me again. Goodbye," I said calmly, and then immediately set his phone number to be blocked. That should stop any more absurd calls from Bob. Having lost his wife and money, Bob will likely live a lonely life now. Given his infertility, remarriage might be difficult for him. Moreover, it's hard to imagine someone falling for a person like Bob who mocks others so readily. All I could think was that he should at least try to repay his debts. I thought about it as if it were someone else's problem. As for me, I'm looking forward to my life with my husband and our soon-to-arrive baby. Both my work and personal life are more fulfilling than ever, and I'm savoring this unparalleled happiness.
Hi, I'm Shirley, a 31-year-old office worker. A year ago, I married Mason, a man I met on a blind date. After a year and a half of dating, he proposed. Settling down had always been my dream, so even though the proposal felt a bit hasty, I said yes. In hindsight, I realized I should have taken a more cautious approach. Not long after our wedding, Mason made a surprising decision to switch jobs. When I asked him about it, he explained that his previous position didn't allow him to fully showcase his skills. What stunned me even more was his announcement that he had already resigned and would be leaving by the end of the month. Thankfully, he found another job quickly, but it came with a lower salary than his last position. At first, I wasn't too worried since I had my own job, but then Mason started pushing me to quit. I might have considered it if his new salary had been enough to support us both, but with his recent job change, his pay was lower. He kept insisting it would go up soon, yet there was no indication of when that might happen. Quitting my job under such uncertain financial circumstances felt risky. We relied on my income to save and cover essential expenses like rent and car payments. Depending solely on Mason's current salary just wasn't practical. One evening, Mason handed me divorce papers, seemingly to intimidate me. "You know I'm ready for this whenever," he challenged. I urged him to take a breath and rethink his words, but he simply stood up and retreated to his room. That confrontation left me reflecting on the hasty decisions and unexpected changes that had occurred since I met Mason. I firmly told him I wouldn't quit my job until his salary improved. At first, he seemed to accept my stance, but the topic kept coming up. Each time he mentioned it, I stood my ground with the same unwavering response. Now, a year into our marriage, Mason's salary still hadn't changed, yet he kept pressuring me to quit my job. "When are you going to leave?" he would ask, and I often felt the urge to respond sarcastically. However, I knew our financial stability hinged on my income. If it was so crucial for me to resign, I believed Mason should focus on advancing his own career instead. As time passed, I began to understand why Mason was so adamant about my leaving work. This became evident during our visits to his parents' house. Whenever we were with his mother, Martha, Mason would feign concern, claiming he wanted to ease her burden. She would express her gratitude, and then he would glance at me pointedly, as if nudging me toward resignation. He suggested she needed help, but Martha was anything but helpless. She was active, healthy, and even held a part-time job that funded her hobbies and social life. It was clear she didn't require my assistance, yet Mason continued to push for my departure. "If only one of us could be home during the day, we could check on Mom every day," Mason said one day, seemingly out of nowhere. It was clear he envisioned me visiting Martha daily, which felt overwhelming and unnecessary. I asked him directly what he expected me to do since Martha was perfectly capable on her own. He listed off mundane tasks like helping with housework and running errands. It was obvious he had plans for how I could contribute, but none of them justified leaving my career. This endless cycle of requests and justifications was exhausting. I needed Mason to realize that while I was willing to support his family when needed, giving up my job without a solid reason was not something I could take lightly. "But Martha has her part-time job and spends most of her days out with friends, right?" I pointed out when he suggested I could take care of housework during the day. His response left me puzzled. Was he really implying I should become his mother's maid? Mason was deeply concerned about maintaining a certain image, especially in front of his parents. If he was so eager to take care of them, why couldn't he handle the household chores himself? Despite his persistent pressure, I stood firm in my decision not to quit my job. I also opted not to visit my in-laws on my days off, though I did make an effort to see them during major holidays like New Year's. As I reflected on our visits, a pattern emerged. Mason frequently delegated tasks to me, asking me to tidy up, assist his mom, or run errands. I pushed back against these requests. When he suggested I go to the store, I would reply, "Don't you know this area better than I do?" His standard excuse was that it wouldn't look right if he did it himself. A rationale I found both puzzling and manipulative. It seemed he was more focused on controlling the situation and projecting an image of family care than on genuinely caring for his parents or me. As time passed, my perception of Mason changed. It became clear that he was more focused on appearances than on genuine affection or respect for me. When I finally confronted him, asking why he didn't help out or even consider quitting his job to care for his mother, his reaction spoke volumes. He looked both disgusted and uncomfortable, replying, "That's not something I'm supposed to do. I'm giving you these instructions so my mom thinks you're a considerate, useful wife. You should appreciate how kind I'm being." His words were revealing. He essentially wanted to shift all the demanding tasks onto me while showcasing his virtue as if it were something extraordinary. But I am neither his servant nor his subordinate, and I certainly didn't deserve to be disrespected in front of my in-laws. It became increasingly clear that Mason's priorities were misaligned, valuing appearances over genuine partnership and support. If he continued with these unreasonable demands, I refuse to stay silent. I will stand my ground. Despite our numerous discussions, Mason hasn't changed. He keeps pestering me with the same question. Are you going to quit your job? Furthermore, every time we visit my in-laws, he continues to boss me around as he always has. After reaching my breaking point, I realized it was time for a serious conversation. We need to talk about our future, I said, hoping to guide our discussion towards something constructive. What are you even trying to say? Mason shot back, clearly annoyed. I'm honestly fed up. I'm tired of you constantly asking when I'll quit my job, and I'm exhausted from the pressure to take care of Martha, I expressed, laying out my grievances. Why are you so upset about that? You're my wife, and it's your duty to care for my parents, Mason retorted. Don't you think it's unfair to place that responsibility solely on me? Shouldn't you, as their biological child, the one helping with the housework and caring for them? I challenged, confronting his outdated views. No way, it's the wife's duty to do it. Are you the kind of person who doesn't care about family? Mason accused, clearly upset by my resistance. I'm disappointed to hear you say that, he added. Seizing the moment to highlight the double standard, I asked, then let me ask you this. How have you been caring for my parents? If I asked you to take care of them, would you do it? Mason stared at me blankly, struggling to understand the connection. What are you saying? Why should a husband be responsible for his wife's parents? So does that mean you won't ever take care of my parents? I pressed, aiming to highlight his inconsistency. The husband's parents and the wife's parents are totally different, Mason replied, missing the point entirely. What difference does that make? I don't understand, I said, feeling increasingly frustrated. I didn't realize you were so out of touch. It's like talking to my old boss. What are you trying to say? Mason asked, clearly confused. I'm saying that a husband should take care of his own parents, and you should support your wife's family too, I replied, trying to emphasize the importance of mutual support and equality in our responsibilities. I felt the need to clarify, so I added, so you only prioritize your own blood relatives. I'm really disappointed in you. I won't be visiting your parents anymore. Why would you do that? Enough is enough. I'm the one who wants you to stop this nonsense, he shot back. No way. How dare you talk to me like that? My mom is right, Mason exclaimed, his temper flaring. Ha, your mom was talking about you. She said you're a badly behaved husband. That's why she gave me this, he said, pulling a piece of paper from his bag. It was divorce papers. What? You had divorce papers ready? I asked, shocked, but Mason looked oddly proud of himself. See? I scared you, didn't I? I'm ready for this anytime, so think about what you just said, Mason declared smugly before heading to his room. Unbelievable. Why is Mason so selfish? I thought, fuming. That triumphant look on his face made it clear that the divorce papers were just a threat to manipulate me. The fact that Martha was involved only fueled my suspicion. Mason was acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me while following her orders. It was ridiculous. I wouldn't let him have his way. How could he not see that our marriage was in serious trouble with this behavior? His lack of understanding only frustrated me further. Mason had already completed the divorce papers and handed them to me with witnesses present, including Martha and his friends. This meant I could sign and file them whenever I wanted. The next day after Mason left for work, I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office as a precaution. I also filed a notice of non-acceptance of the marriage certificate. Knowing Mason might threaten to file a marriage certificate on his own, I called my parents to explain the situation. When they learned I had prepared the divorce papers, they were initially shocked but quickly rallied behind my decision. Outraged by Mason's behavior, they offered to help me move my belongings right away. Taking a leave from work, I had my parents come over, and together we relocated all my things to their house while Mason was out. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely comfortable and at ease in their home. Reflecting on my marriage, it became clear that Mason never contributed his fair share to our household chores. I was the one cooking dinner after long workdays and managing all the cleaning and laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to care for his parents, which simply wasn't feasible. That evening, Mason called, likely just back from work. Hey, where are you right now? He asked. I'm at my parents' house, I replied. Oh, why would you go back there without my permission? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying the night, he questioned, his tone a mix of surprise and selfishness. I almost laughed at how oblivious he was to the seriousness of the situation, thinking I was just staying overnight when I had actually taken most of my belongings with me. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "What are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food," he demanded. "Make it yourself," I replied, ending the call. I couldn't engage in a conversation about divorce while he continued to be so dismissive. To find some peace, I decided to block his number and wait for him to come to my parents' house. A week later, Mason arrived at my parents' home, accompanied by his parents. They all wore serious expressions as we faced off in the living room, 3 against 3. "How could you do this? How could you leave without my permission?" Mason demanded, incredulity and accusation lacing his voice. "You treated me like a housekeeper, Mason. All I ever asked was for you to take responsibility for your family," I replied, stating my ground. "That's not true. What kind of wife would I be if I didn't take care of Mason?" Martha shot me a fierce glare. My father began to tremble with anger, but I quickly intervened. Mason insisted that I quit my job to care for Martha, claiming it was my duty as his wife. Yet when it comes to my own family, he expects me to manage everything alone. Ultimately, Mason seeks obedience, using me to take care of his parents while taking all the credit. That's why he prioritizes his parents over mine. "Have you ever heard Mason say these things?" I asked. Martha continued to glare, but Liam looked confused, as if he hadn't known about any of this before. "Let me clear the air," Mason interjected, waving the divorce papers and claiming it was all Martha's idea. "Why would you say that?" Liam asked, clearly taken aback. "Oh no, it's because Camila has an attitude problem," Martha stammered. "And did you really say that Camila's parents aren't a priority?" I pressed. "Well, it's only natural for your parents to come first," Martha shot back defensively. "Don't be absurd. I came here to support you after hearing about the unfair treatment Camila has faced, but it seems you're the one at fault. Don't hide behind her parents' authority to manipulate the situation," Liam said, causing Mason to visibly shrink in his seat. Liam then turned to me and my parents, offering an apology. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by my foolish son. I will have a serious talk with him." "Liam, you're not to blame at all, so please don't apologize," I replied. "Thank you for your understanding, but there's something else I need to address." I turned to Mason, who now looked nervous. "The divorce papers you gave me? I've already filed them. We're no longer married." Mason and Martha both turned pale. "Why did you file those without my permission?" Mason demanded, his shock evident. "You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. Besides, you filled out your part and had Martha sign as a witness," I calmly explained, leaving Mason momentarily speechless. Seeing the escalating tension, Liam intervened, furious. "Mason, you used divorce as a threat," he exclaimed, and in a moment of rage, slapped Mason across the face. Martha looked visibly shaken by the scene. Liam then turned to me and offered a sincere apology. "I sincerely apologize that you had to witness this. You have every right to divorce this fool. On behalf of Mason, I'm truly sorry for the damage done to your marriage," Liam said, tightening his grip on Mason's collar as he demanded apologies from both him and Martha before ushering them out of the house. Later, I expressed my gratitude to Liam for his intervention. He reassured me that all of Mason's assets and property would be transferred to me without any complications, considering my higher income and the effort I had invested in managing our household. It was a relief to know I had secured everything from our marriage. I later learned that Liam had divorced Martha, clearly appalled by her behavior. One day, I bumped into a colleague from Mason's former workplace who had some surprising news. Mason hadn't been performing well at his job and was frequently criticized by his boss. In a fit of defiance, he resigned and switched jobs, which only deepened my frustration with him. Instead of owning up to his shortcomings, he chose to blame others, which likely contributed to his lower pay at the new position. Now, I feel a sense of relief having left him behind. I've rented a cozy apartment and am enjoying my newfound independence. Work is going well, and I'd even received a raise recently. For now, I'm not interested in dating. I prefer to focus on my career. Mason was always more concerned with appearances than with genuine skills. He put on a show at home but never made any real progress in his career. It's unfortunate how some spouses resort to using divorce threats as a way to feel powerful. It's a major misstep. I hope they eventually recognize their mistakes and find happiness on their own. As for me, I'm grateful to have moved on from Mason and look forward to the possibility of meeting someone special when I'm ready.
I, a 29-year-old male, and Erica, a 27-year-old female, had been in a relationship for 2 years and got engaged 4 months ago. After our engagement, Erica moved into my house, and we split the expenses in a way that I covered the mortgage while she took care of utilities, groceries, and household items. We planned to add her to the house's ownership after our marriage to ensure she had equity in it. Erica's best friend, Leah, who is also 27, has been her friend since high school. I haven't particularly liked Leah, but I've always been polite because I know she'll be a part of our lives. However, my issue with Leah is that she often acts like my home is hers. For instance, she frequently brings her rather troublesome boyfriend over. Additionally, she tends to speak to me disrespectfully in my own house, as if she and Erica co-own it. One day, I discovered that some of my tools were missing from my garage, and upon checking my security camera, I found that Leah and her boyfriend had taken them when they were with Erica. When I asked Erica about it, she claimed they were just borrowing the tools and would return them. It took multiple reminders to finally get them back weeks later. I also have a valuable wine and liquor collection. One Friday evening when I was working late, I heard clinking bottles, and I found Leah behind my bar. She claimed Erica said it was okay to borrow a bottle for her party and that she'd pay for it. I told her it was not okay and asked her to leave. When I discussed this with Erica, she couldn't recall authorizing Leah to take a bottle. At this point, I expressed my discomfort with Leah being in my house. Erica understood, but she didn't take my concerns seriously. The last straw was when I couldn't find my golf clubs, which are a significant investment for me. I reviewed the security camera footage and discovered that Leah had used my garage code to take them. I lost my temper, called Erica, and insisted she get my clubs back immediately. Erica explained that Leah had asked for the garage code to retrieve some clothes from her closet, and Leah had taken my clubs along with her things. Leah claimed her boyfriend needed them for work. I eventually got my clubs back after almost 4 days, and they were dirty. I sat Erica down and told her that if I ever saw Leah in my house again, I'd call the police without discussion. Erica got upset, stating that Leah was her best friend, and it wasn't fair to ban her from our home. I pointed out that this was a recurring issue, and since Erica's possessions weren't affected, she didn't seem to care. I suggested Erica could visit Leah at her apartment, but she said she couldn't because Leah didn't like her apartment, and her boyfriend was always there, making Erica uncomfortable. Now I'm receiving the silent treatment and being called unreasonable, but I don't believe I'm in the wrong. Before diving into the update, I want to express gratitude for the insightful comments received earlier. Many of you advised against putting my fiancé on the deed to my home and even questioned the viability of our marriage. It became clear that the issue wasn't just about Leah. It was a deeper problem with my fiancée, Erica. I confronted Erica about the situation when I found Leah's car parked in our driveway. I insisted that Leah leave, and despite her protests, I made it clear that I would involve the police if necessary. Erica, in her attempt to defend Leah, couldn't sway my decision. I sat her down and showed her this post. After reading through the comments for 20 minutes, Erica's response indicated she didn't grasp the gravity of our situation. That was my breaking point. I asked Erica to hold out her hand, remove the engagement ring, and ended our relationship. She pleaded, apologizing and promising to sever ties with Leah, but I couldn't ignore the fundamental lack of trust I felt toward her. Erica retreated to our room while I began packing her belongings in the kitchen. I reached out to her parents, informing them of the situation. To my surprise, they shared that Leah had long been banned from their home since high school due to similar issues. They expressed their anger and disappointment and agreed to come this weekend to collect Erica and her belongings. The weight lifted off my shoulders is immense, and I can't help but feel a sense of relief and resolution. Realizing the depth of my situation became possible because of this post. I sincerely thank each and every one of you. With newfound freedom, I'm eager to indulge in my hobbies, like playing golf with my reclaimed clubs. The prospect of embracing single life is both exciting and liberating. Your support has meant the world to me, and I can't express my gratitude enough. As for my next story, I'm seeking your perspective on a situation with my girlfriend. Early in our relationship, she decided to test my consideration by canceling a date, one where we were planning to take our relationship to the next level. It was a significant drive for me, and she waited until I was halfway there before letting me know. Despite her claims of feeling unwell, her timing seemed deliberate, testing my reaction. I'd offered my understanding and even suggested visiting her to help, but she declined. She later explained that this test was pivotal for our relationship, emphasizing my consideration. However, I can't shake my frustration. I feel she lacked consideration for my time and effort, seemingly inconveniencing me intentionally. When I confronted her about this, she half-heartedly apologized, downplayed the situation, and dismissed my feelings. We ended up arguing, leaving me feeling like an insensitive jerk for getting upset over what seems like a small issue. The fact that she lacks remorse and even makes me feel guilty for being rightfully upset is troubling. It feels like a manipulative and gaslighting tactic, raising several red flags about her behavior. Your insights are invaluable, and I'm struggling to navigate this situation. I've come to realize that you're absolutely right. I seem to be dating another version of my ex. It's disheartening when the person who should be administering the relationship test fails so miserably at it themselves. What's even worse is their inability to consider the possibility that the other person might be dissatisfied with their behavior. She should have kept her little test to herself. Your conduct on that day was appropriate and considerate. Kudos to you for handling it well. Now, moving forward, you might find yourself questioning every situation, wondering if it's a test. And frankly, it might be. It's crucial to have a discussion about this. It's not a minor issue to be upset about. Your concerns are valid, and addressing them is essential. As for the next story, titled, "Am I the a-hole for buying a door for my son behind my husband's back?" I must say your husband's behavior is incredibly controlling and frankly scary. It's deeply concerning that he believes your son shouldn't have a door to his room until he's 18, essentially denying him any privacy. I understand your perspective. Teens deserve some freedom and privacy within reason. It's not just about personal space, it's also a matter of safety. Without a proper door, your son is at risk in case of emergencies like a fire. If a fire were to break out, he would have no barrier to prevent smoke and flames from entering his room, putting his safety in jeopardy. Your decision to provide him with a door is not only about granting him privacy, but also ensuring his safety. While your husband may see it as a challenge to his authority, your son's well-being should take precedence. It's unfortunate that your husband reacted this way, but your intentions were rooted in your son's safety and comfort. Navigating this situation may require a difficult conversation, but your concern for your son's safety and privacy is completely valid. Your husband's behavior is indeed troubling, and it puts both you and your son at risk. It's disheartening to see the kind of man he has turned out to be. I'd urge you to prioritize finding a safe and secure living arrangement for you and your son. I have genuine concerns that his mistreatment may escalate if you continue to stand up for your rights, especially with your recent act of giving your son a door. I genuinely worry that staying in a home with a potentially violent person is not a safe option. Nobody should have to endure such a situation. It's evident that your husband made the unilateral decision to deny your son a door without considering your input. By now, you've shown him what it feels like to have one, and he clearly dislikes it. The question I have is why you've stayed in this situation for so long, enduring a man who treats your son in this manner. The notion that a man automatically holds authority and dominion over his household as the ultimate ruler is unjust and outdated. While you're not the a-hole for getting your son a door, it's essential to recognize that this may be an ongoing battle throughout his teenage years. If the situation doesn't change, it's unlikely he'll return once he turns 18. There are larger issues at play here than just the door, and maltreatment of your son is a severe concern. It's clear that your husband's difficult upbringing doesn't excuse his mistreatment of your son. It's worth noting that you had your son when you were 21 and your husband was 32, making it all the more important to ensure a safe and supportive environment for your child's well-being. The age gap between you and your husband, combined with his consistent attempts to suppress your voice and punish both you and your son for questioning his authority, is deeply concerning. The fact that you feel compelled to resort to secretive actions to advocate for your child's well-being raises alarming red flags. I fear that your husband might harbor an unhealthy, authoritarian mindset about the role of the head of the household. Regardless of his upbringing or religious beliefs, there is no justification for his controlling behavior. It's crucial for you to consider whether the current status quo aligns with what you genuinely want for yourself and your child. Music. In the last story, the question arises: am I the a-hole for canceling a vacation with my fiancé and taking my daughter on a vacation instead? My daughter, Maya, who is 16, struggles with severe anxiety. Despite being in therapy and medication, there are certain areas, particularly school-related matters, where we need to tread lightly due to her condition. My policy has always been that as long as she tries her best and passes, I am content. My fiancé, however, has been pressuring Maya to work harder and achieve better grades, suggesting she aim for straight A's to get into a good college. I've consistently shut down these demands, stating that her current grades are suitable for her plans to attend community college and then transfer to a local state school. Here's the issue. My fiancé made a secret deal with Maya behind my back. He promised her a trip to Disneyland if she managed to achieve straight A's this semester, withholding it if she received a B. Maya, eager to experience Disneyland, kept this pact hidden from me. Over time, I noticed her growing stress, attributing it to the challenges of her junior year. However, last week, she finally broke down, revealing the deal she had made with my fiancé. I was furious upon learning this. Seeing the toll it had taken on her, I canceled the hotel reservation for the ski trip my fiancé, Maya, and I were planning. Instead, I booked a last-minute trip for Maya and me to Disneyland and Universal Studios this week. Maya has been in a fragile state, experiencing panic attacks and stress-induced sickness, so I prioritized her well-being over the initially planned vacation. Maya truly deserves this trip after all her hard work this year. However, my fiancé is expecting me to cover half of the cancellation fees and activities that can be refunded. We got into a heated argument, and we're currently not speaking. Deep down, I know this relationship is over, but I wanted to confirm if I was in the wrong here. I understand what he might have intended to do, but this was clearly not the way. He undid all the progress Maya achieved through therapy and ended up hurting her more than helping her. Besides, what does he expect her to do if she gets into a good school? Stress her even more with a demanding university environment? It's all messed up. I appreciate your support for my decision to stand up for my daughter. I'm looking forward to enjoying this trip with her and having a wonderful mother-daughter experience. Regarding her education, I agree that starting at a community college for 2 years is a smart and more supportive approach, especially considering her struggles with anxiety, which she is still working to control. Your point about my fiancé manipulating my daughter and convincing her to keep secrets from me is alarming. His actions endangered her mental and physical health, all for his misguided belief in what he thinks is the only path to success. His manipulation could have had dangerous consequences, and I now see it as a pattern in his relationship with her, establishing that it's acceptable to do things behind my back if it benefits him. As for the fees, the more I reflect on it, the more I feel it should be his responsibility to pay for them. He manipulated everyone involved, including me, and I shouldn't be responsible for the financial repercussions of his actions.
Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself? Well, sort of. He injured his leg. Old people can be such a nuisance. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a nice way to say it. It's fine. He's already declining quite a bit. I can't handle the fuss of old people, but you're used to it, so you'll be fine. The other day, my husband's grandfather, Michael, fell in a garden and injured his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's already 82 years old. Because of his age, we're having him rest in bed just to be safe so it doesn't get worse. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband was my boss at the company where I worked, a company founded by his grandfather. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was already the president and my grandfather-in-law was the chairman. But back then, the grandfather was still handling all the important tasks and responsibilities of the company. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he remained chairman but handed over most of the public duties to my father-in-law. Michael, you've worked hard all this time. Now, leave the company matters to Christopher and take it easy, my mother-in-law said with a smile, but her words sounded sarcastic to me. Grandfather-in-law is a bit stubborn but a fair and kind person with a good reputation. In contrast, my father-in-law seems somewhat immature, never expressing his opinions clearly and utterly unreliable compared to Grandpa. And he always does whatever my mother-in-law says. My grandmother-in-law has already passed away, and I never met her. My husband and I started dating when we worked together on the same product planning team 3 years after I joined the company. My husband, energetically leading the team, seemed reliable to me, though a bit self-righteous. Maybe I felt that way because I lost my father early and grew up with just my mother. My mother also passed away from illness 2 years ago, and now I have no family other than my in-laws. Shortly after I got married, my mother fell ill and needed care, so I quit my job to take care of her. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was probably due to a single comment from Grandpa. It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you alone. Don't worry and take good care of her. Thanks to that, I was able to be by my mother's side every day for a year without financial worries until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a bit dissatisfied, but I was truly grateful. However, since Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, everyone's attitudes towards him have gradually changed. They no longer listen to his opinions as much, and I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him carelessly. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but watching my mother-in-law and husband's behavior, I can't help but feel that way. My father-in-law's attitude is non-committal, but it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa as if he's no longer needed since he's practically retired. Watching my in-laws' behavior, I feel somewhat angry. Hey, don't you think your attitude, Patricia, and yours too, is a bit cold towards Grandpa? So what's the big deal? Grandpa tries to talk to you and you barely respond. You don't even try to help them. Like I have time to deal with old people. You can take care of Grandpa. You're the one with the free time. You don't have to talk like that. Quiet, I'm tired from work. Don't nag me about unnecessary things. This is how it goes no matter. They won't listen to me. My grandfather-in-law doesn't say anything to his family about this. Now I'm the only one who talks to my grandfather-in-law at home. Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it will be good rehabilitation. Thank you. Let's go out for a bit then. The two of us went to the park, where there were several families with children playing around. My grandfather-in-law looked at the scene with joy. Christopher and Daniel enjoyed times like that too. Grandpa, I was busy with work and couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise Christopher and Daniel properly, my grandfather-in-law said with a slightly sad face, almost like he was talking to himself. Christopher is my father-in-law, and Daniel is my husband. I think about how everyone can be kinder to my grandfather-in-law, but I can't come up with a good idea. But then my in-laws suggested building a house for my grandfather-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is bad, it's hard to use. But instead of spending money on repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location. A new house? Michael is getting older, and it's good that he only got injured last time, but we never know what will happen. So let's make the house barrier-free so we won't have trouble if care is needed. I see. We can even put Michael's room in the middle so everyone can take care of him easily. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Right, so it's settled then. And Michael, at the cost. If it's a house for all of us, I'll take care of it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money. Typical Michael, thank you. We appreciate it, my mother-in-law smiled happily. It seems to me that they only flatter him when they want money. But if everyone takes care of my grandfather-in-law after moving to the new house, I thought there could be nothing better. Mr. Jones is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets. My grandfather-in-law liked his character and made him in-house counsel, and it's been nearly 30 years. He is 58 now and a person my grandfather-in-law trusts the most. I've met him several times and he seems to be a very honest person. He always cares about my grandfather-in-law's health, and sometimes I think he's more like a son than his real sons. Having such people around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a little relieved. I wasn't informed about the details of the house being built, but my mother-in-law seemed very cheerful, and the three of them were looking at interior design magazines and discussing various things, so it seemed to be going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1,820,000. Wait, what's this about $1,820,000? I exclaimed. My grandfather-in-law had become a co-signer for a loan for a friend's company, but that company was in trouble, and the debt had become my grandfather-in-law's responsibility. Wait, they're not going to take the house. It's under construction, are they? Since the contract has already been completed, and as Patricia said, it's in the president's name, so it's fine, my mother-in-law seemed relieved at those words. Oh, thank goodness. I'm glad we did it my way. Listening to that conversation, I learned for the first time that the house was in my father-in-law's name. Even though my grandfather-in-law had paid for it, putting it in my father-in-law's name seemed just like something my mother-in-law would do. I also wondered why they didn't think of giving up the house to help repay the debt. Hey, this debt is Michael's fault, and it has nothing to do with us or the company, right? Well, it was signed in Michael's name. Oh good, then there's no problem. I couldn't understand what was good about it, but since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during that conversation, I didn't intervene either. After all, it's not an amount I could handle. A few days later, my grandfather-in-law's behavior began to change gradually. Grandpa, what would you like to eat for lunch? Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that. Huh? Sorry, Emily, right? I was lost in thought. At first, I thought he was just deep in thought, and when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel uneasy. Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal? Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You ate your meal earlier. Didn't eat? Are you trying to starve me? I wondered if my grandfather-in-law's condition was triggered by the $1,820,000 debt, and seeing that none of his family members were trying to help him might have been a double shock. I tried to persuade my grandfather-in-law to go to the hospital, but he adamantly refused. He might not want to admit that he could have dementia. I didn't want to force him, but I felt helpless on my own. I consulted my husband, but he simply brushed it off, saying it had nothing to do with him. My mother-in-law wasn't any help either, so I turned to my father-in-law as the only option. Yeah, I heard from Patricia, Daniel. They think it might be dementia. Can you go to the hospital with us? I asked him. But it's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, others will find out my father has dementia, he responded. There are good medications now that can slow the progression. Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Emily is here, so they'll be fine, right? I couldn't help but feel frustrated by their lack of concern. I couldn't depend on them. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you properly examined, I urged. Who are you? Where are you planning to take me? You're up to no good, he retorted. I felt tears welling up, seeing how stubborn my once kind grandfather-in-law had become. But my mother-in-law just laughed, amused. Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. But now everything, even the company, is all Christopher's, she remarked casually.
Patricia, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's listening to everything. He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling. Just thinking about it gives me chills. He's nothing but a nuisance now, I protested. How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for the family all of his life. My mother-in-law's words made me both angry and sad. But my grandfather-in-law just smiled. See, this old man doesn't understand anything, she added, laughing. Patricia, I was furious at my mother-in-law's callousness. But soon the new house would be ready. Perhaps things might change once we move there. Since it's a house that Grandpa built, the family might show some gratitude and be kind to him. I couldn't completely abandon that faint hope. And 2 months later, the house was finally built. For days, I had been compelled to pack my in-laws' and husband's belongings, while my father-in-law's and my own items remained mostly untouched. Even when I attempted to organize my things, my in-laws and husband kept assigning me tasks, preventing any progress. However, I reasoned it would be okay to relocate the smaller items later since this house wasn't disappearing. On moving day, after transferring most of the belongings, I went to call my father-in-law, but my husband intercepted me. "Ah, you and Grandpa can stay here," he announced. "What? You can stay in this house? We don't need any extra baggage in the new house. In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on, and I'll give you Grandpa's debt too." "Well, you can at least be a housekeeper. Hey, let's go." "Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with all the debt repayment and live-in care." My in-laws cheerfully departed, leaving me stunned. For a while, I couldn't comprehend what had just occurred. Were we abandoned, not just me, but also my grandfather-in-law, only they would reside in the new house? It took me some time to grasp because it was beyond my imagination that someone could be so cruel. How should I explain this to my grandfather-in-law? Slowly, I made my way back to the rear room. I didn't mind caring for my grandfather-in-law at all. That was my intention from the start. As I timidly prepared to call out to him, noticing his back facing me, he seemed to sense my presence and turned around before I could speak. "Have they gone already?" His expression as he uttered those words looked entirely different from what it had been just months ago. To be honest, he seemed like a different person. I wondered if a new symptom had emerged, but the next moment my grandfather-in-law smiled, and his subsequent words caught me off guard. As I was talking to my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Jones came. "Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?" "Yes, it's all done. Let's go, shall we?" Where are we going?" "Of course, to the new house." I left the house where I had been residing, guided by my grandfather-in-law, without fully understanding what was unfolding. The following month, my mother-in-law and husband bombarded me with countless calls. My grandfather-in-law declared he wouldn't entertain their calls anymore, but I answered my husband's call due to the looming divorce. "Hey, Emily, is Grandpa with you? When I went to the old house, it was up for sale. It's not worth $1,820,000, so you can't repay the debt." "Is that why you did that?" my husband interrogated. "What do you mean?" "Put Grandpa on. Dad said he can't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous." I knew what he was referring to, but I wanted to hear my husband's side of the story. Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder, and a shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held, resulting in Dad being dismissed as president. But the executive director is well-liked, and maybe Grandpa thought it was better to hand over the company to him. The executive director must have deceived the senile old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid. You seem to be misunderstanding something, but Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before. What? Until that moving day, I genuinely believed that my grandfather-in-law had dementia. It appears that my grandfather-in-law harbored suspicions from the moment my mother-in-law mentioned building a house to live with him. So he devised a plan. He feigned dementia to observe how my in-laws and husband would react. As anticipated, they revealed their true colors, one after another. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind. I struggled to contain my laughter because everything unfolded exactly as I had expected. My grandfather-in-law then said, I found myself surprised, relieved, and slightly conflicted. To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies, my grandfather-in-law chuckled. It seemed he had been receiving regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. Jones. With my grandfather-in-law gone, my father-in-law and husband acted as they pleased, self-righteous, and completely ignoring the opinions of the employees, often entertaining at the company's expense. Eventually, my grandfather-in-law handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he harbored concerns about the future, leading him to take decisive action. In the end, he decided he couldn't entrust it to his son and left it to the executive director. I explained. What about the $1,820,000 debt? My husband inquired. That's gone now, I replied. Indeed, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's dad, but he had personal assets exceeding that amount. However, I deliberately omitted this information to avoid my mother-in-law and husband targeting those assets. The friend was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Moreover, the countryside land owned by the son was going to be developed into a resort, allowing him to sell it at a high price. I explained further. "You're kidding," my husband exclaimed. "More importantly, are you guys okay?" I asked, concerned. "We're not okay. Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?" my husband lamented. "Well, there's also the mortgage on the house," I revealed. "What? What do you mean, the mortgage on the house?" My husband was taken aback. "Haven't you realized it yet? The house money should have all been paid by Grandpa," I clarified. Christopher signed without checking everything. "It shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president," I added. "You're kidding," my husband sighed. As a consequence, my parents-in-law lost the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now they reside in an old apartment over 50 years old, struggling to repay the unpaid loan. Despite their alternating attempts to contact me, suggesting we all live together, it was impossible now. My grandfather-in-law retired from his chairman position and bought an old house in the countryside. "Emily, you can go and live wherever you like freely. You don't have to worry about living expenses," my grandfather-in-law assured me. But I chose to be with him. "If I'm not in the way, please let me be with you," I expressed, tears welling up in my eyes. My grandfather-in-law's eyes welled up too. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized and procedures were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from inheritance. I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to him, I intend to take care of him until the end. Now, the two of us enjoy working in the fields together. "Dad, look at this radish, it's big," I exclaimed as warm moments flowed in the pouring sunlight. I wish for these days to continue, even just one day longer.
My name is Clara, a 32-year-old woman who, once a firm believer in fairy tale endings, saw her life take an unexpected turn 3 years ago when I met Mark, the man who would eventually become my husband. Our story unfolds as a journey of love, trust, and eventual betrayal against the backdrop of what seemed like a perfect marriage. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning when fate led me to the Corner Cafe, a John Grisham novel in hand, lost in the world of legal thrillers. That's when Mark entered, immediately noticeable with an air of confidence and a warmth in his smile that felt inviting. "Hey, is that Grisham's latest?" he asked, nodding towards my book, his friendly voice tinged with genuine curiosity. "Yeah, just started it. He's always a good read," I responded, pleasantly surprised by the ease of our conversation. We delved into discussions about our favorite authors, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I grew closer. Our shared interests in music, particularly old jazz, and a mutual love for exploring hidden bookstores around the city cemented our bond. Mark was charming, respectful, and attentive, and each encounter felt like catching up with an old friend. One evening, as we walked along the river, Mark's tone turned serious. "Clara, I've never felt this way before. I think I'm falling for you," he confessed under the dim glow of the streetlights. His words sent a rush of warmth through me, and I admitted, "I feel the same, Mark. You're unlike anyone I've ever met." 6 months flew by, and our relationship only grew stronger. During a cozy dinner at my apartment, Mark proposed, and there was no hesitation in my yes. I loved him, and I believed in our future together. The joy of our engagement, however, was soon met with apprehension as the time came to meet Mark's parents. His mother, Linda, was a stern woman with piercing eyes that seemed to judge my every move, while his father was more amiable but carried an undeniable seriousness, especially regarding the institution of marriage. During a formal dinner at their house, Mark's father brought up the subject of a prenuptial agreement. "It's just practical," he stated matter-of-factly. The request caught me off guard, but given my past experience with a cheating ex-boyfriend, I understood the necessity. "I agree, but I have a condition," I said, steadying my voice. "If either of us cheats, the cheater owes the other $100,000. Mark's expression was a mix of surprise and respect. "I promise, Clara, I'd never cheat on you," he said earnestly. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, filled with laughter, dancing, and promises of forever. The first year of our marriage felt like living in a dream. We traveled to romantic destinations, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and supported each other's ambitions. Mark was not just my husband. He was my best friend and confidant. After the whirlwind of our wedding, Mark and I settled into married life with an ease that surprised even me. Our first year was like living in a bubble of happiness, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Paris was a dream, strolling along the Seine as two lovebirds lost in a city of love. "Can you believe we're here?" I inquired of Mark one evening as we observed the Eiffel Tower lighting up. He drew me close and responded, "With you, I can believe anything. This is just the start for us, Clara." Those days were filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and promises of a shared future. Returning home with a suitcase full of memories, our bond felt unbreakable. In our daily routine, Mark would bid me farewell each morning before work, and I'd have dinner waiting for him upon his return. Our conversations stretched late into the night, discussing everything and nothing. One night, while cleaning up after dinner, Mark remarked, "You know, I never thought I'd be this happy doing mundane stuff like washing dishes." I playfully splashed water at him, and he laughed, catching it in his hands. "That's because you've got an amazing wife. It's all about good company," he said. "Absolutely the best decision of my life marrying you." Despite the growing pressure from external expectations, particularly the anticipation of starting a family, our happiness persisted. Linda, Mark's mother, would drop not-so-subtle hints at family gatherings, asking, "So when are we going to hear some good news?" I brushed it off with a joke, but her persistence strained me over time. Mark reassured me, saying, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready, not minutes sooner." Our first year of marriage was magical, celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. Mark surprised me with a necklace I had admired months ago. "Happy anniversary, Clara. Here's to many more years of happiness," he said, his eyes shining with love. As we cuddled on the couch that night, I felt incredibly fortunate. However, as our second year of marriage began, the pressure from Mark's family, particularly Linda, took a toll. It wasn't just about starting a family. Her criticisms infiltrated every aspect of our lives. Linda's disapproval, often hidden in seemingly helpful comments, turned every visit into a nightmare. One afternoon, as I set the table for lunch, Linda walked into the kitchen, eyeing the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" she remarked, her tone dripping with disdain. Clenching my jaw, I tried to maintain composure. Her critiques extended beyond my cooking, finding fault in everything from house decorations to how I spent my free time. One evening, relaxing in the living room, Linda gave her unsolicited opinion, stating, "You know, Clara, if Mark gave me the money he spends on you." I contemplated hiring a proper cleaner and cook. Mark appeared uncomfortable, but he remained silent. His quiet response felt like a betrayal, and though seething with frustration, I managed to say, "Well, Linda, I'm doing my best here." The hurt intensified as Mark's attitude began to mirror his mother's criticisms, albeit in a more subtle manner. Following one of Linda's visits, Mark casually suggested, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." A pang of hurt and frustration hit me, and I questioned, "So you think I can't handle it either?" He backpedaled, saying, "No, that's not what I meant." But the damage was done. Constant criticisms and Mark's growing detachment strained our marriage, leading to arguments over trivial matters and transforming our once easy conversations into tense exchanges. After a particularly heated argument, I found myself wondering aloud, "What happened to us, Mark? We used to be on the same team." He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated, and replied, "I don't know, Clara. Everything feels so complicated now." That night, I went to bed feeling lonely and misunderstood. Linda's insidious comments had invaded not only our home, but also our marriage, making me question whether the love Mark and I shared could withstand this constant barrage of negativity. As the third year of our marriage unfolded, a sense of unease settled in my heart. The once bright flame of our love seemed to flicker under the shadow of doubt and distrust. It all started with repeated phone calls from a name that kept popping up on Mark's phone, Jake. Mark's demeanor changed whenever that name flashed on the screen. One evening, as we watched TV, his phone rang again, and I couldn't help but notice the nervous glance he threw my way. "Who's Jake?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart pounded. "Just a new guy at work, no one important," Mark replied, but his voice was too nonchalant, and his answer seemed rehearsed. Mark's behavior continued to shift. He started coming home late from work with flimsy and inconsistent excuses. His wardrobe underwent a transformation, shifting from casual to sharply tailored suits. One night, as he prepared to leave for another late night at work, I questioned, "Working late again?" Noticing his dressed-up appearance. "Yeah, big project," he said without meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." Frustration boiled over, and I confronted him one day, saying, "This isn't like you, Mark. What's really going on?" My voice trembled with a mixture of anger and fear. Mark sighed, displaying a mix of guilt and annoyance. "I told you, it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" I shot back, "Because you're hiding something. You're never here, and when you are, it's like you're a million miles away." Mark didn't respond. He just grabbed his coat and left, leaving me standing there feeling more alone than ever. That night, lying in our empty bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this limbo of doubt and suspicion. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I called a private detective. It felt like a betrayal, but the constant worry and uncertainty were eating me alive. I needed answers and was determined to get them, no matter what they revealed about the man I thought I knew. The days after contacting the private detective were a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I felt like I walked a tightrope, desperately trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, while my world quietly crumbled around me. Then the call came, shattering my last hope. "Mrs. Johnson, we have conclusive evidence. I'm afraid your suspicions were correct." The detective's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of the news he was delivering. He explained that Mark had been having an affair, and the mysterious Jake on his phone was actually a woman. My heart sank as he detailed their meetings, providing timestamps and photos. It was irrefutable. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of devastation and vindication. My worst fears weren't just fears anymore. They were cold, hard facts. Despite the pain, I decided not to confront Mark immediately. I needed more than just the evidence of his infidelity. I needed to understand the full extent of his deceit. One evening, as I passed by his home office, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Mark was talking to his mother, Linda. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Clara after your birthday." Mark's voice was cold, devoid of any affection he once had for me. "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 65th birthday present before you drop the bomb," Linda replied, her voice laced with a callousness that took my breath away. I leaned against the wall, feeling nauseous. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were plotting against me, waiting to use me for one last expensive gift before discarding me. Fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve, I decided to play along. I continued as if nothing was wrong while secretly gathering more evidence of Mark's infidelity. The detective provided me with everything: photos, videos, and even audio recordings. I was building my case, preparing for the moment I would strike back. As I lay in bed each night next to the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to form in my mind. I would wait until after Linda's birthday. I would give them the illusion of victory. Let them think they had outsmarted me. But when they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Linda's 65th birthday approached, I put on a mask of ignorance, acting as though everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to see my plan through. A few days before the birthday, Linda casually mentioned her upcoming celebration during a family dinner. "So, Clara, I'm expecting a grand 65th birthday. You must have planned something special for me," she said with a sly smile, clearly anticipating a lavish gift. Keeping my emotions in check, I replied with faint enthusiasm, "Of course, Linda. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It'll be a night to remember." Her eyes lit up with glee, not realizing the trap I was setting. "How wonderful! I can't wait. Just a small family gathering, right?" she asked. "Yes, very intimate and exclusive. Just for close family," I confirmed, my words laced with hidden irony. Later that night, Mark approached me, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mom's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, maintaining my composure. "Absolutely. It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her." Mark seemed appeased, but I could tell he was puzzled by my willingness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I managed the final arrangements meticulously, confirming the booking under Linda's name, double-checking the guest list, and ensuring everything was in place for the grand evening. Playing the role of the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, I concealed my true intentions beneath a facade, ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had corroded our marriage. The night before the dinner, as I lay in bed, a twisted sense of satisfaction enveloped me. I was mere hours away from turning the tables on Mark and Linda. They believed they were using me for one last benefit before discarding me. Unaware that I held the reins of the game, the evening of Linda's 65th birthday unfolded in a luxurious restaurant, every detail meticulously planned to reflect the grandeur of the occasion. While Linda reveled in the opulence, I played the part of the gracious daughter-in-law, masking my inner turmoil with a practiced smile. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill, a hefty $4,500. With a steady hand, I reached for my card, my heart pounding. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, observing Linda's satisfied smirk and Mark's uneasy expression. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Clara. This is truly generous," Linda said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Seizing the moment, Mark leaned in with a mocking tone. "By the way, Clara, I want a divorce." His words struck me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see my pain. Linda chimed in sharply. "Well then, I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering after all." Without a word, I stood up and left the restaurant, my dignity intact despite the turmoil inside. As I walked away, I swiftly canceled the payment on my phone and blocked the shared account, ensuring Mark couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I packed my belongings quickly, the finality of my actions setting in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon, my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Linda's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff called the police. "What have you done?" Her words were a cacophony of anger and disbelief, but I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their doing, their betrayal and manipulation coming back to haunt them. After hanging up, I looked around the empty house, once filled with dreams and love, now just a hollow shell. I took a deep breath, stepped out the door, and didn't look back. Their calls continued, desperate pleas for help that I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had closed that chapter of my life for good. In the end, they paid. Mark had to borrow from his parents, but I didn't care where the money came from. It was a small compensation for the betrayal, but more importantly, it was closure. Sitting in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the papers, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been painful, full of betrayal and heartache. But I had come out stronger, more resilient. Walking out into the sunlight, I felt like a free woman ready to start anew. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. After all the darkness, I finally felt like I was stepping into the light.
Alright, this is one of those rare occasions where I feel compelled to share my situation. Normally, I handle these things privately, but this particular issue has grown far too complex to manage alone. Let me start from the beginning. In my household, my husband, Bobby, has an incredibly close relationship with his family, especially his parents. His devotion to them runs so deep that he fulfills their every request without question, regardless of how unreasonable it may seem. This unwavering loyalty has started to become a problem. The Bobby refuses to acknowledge it. Every time I try to talk to him about it, he becomes defensive and dismisses my concerns. The main issue, and the reason I'm seeking advice, is that Bobby has always gone above and beyond for his parents. From the very start of our marriage, he's felt obligated to indulge their wishes. I understand the importance of caring for one's parents. I would do the same if mine lived closer. But there has to be a limit. Unfortunately, Bobby doesn't see it that way. Since we both started earning steady incomes, his parents have often asked us for money. The strange thing is, they aren't struggling financially. In fact, they live quite comfortably and can easily afford their own luxuries. At first, I went along with it because, well, they're his parents and I wanted to respect that. But as time went on, I started feeling uneasy. We sent them so much money over the years, enough that we could have taken a few international vacations by now. I've tried explaining to Bobby that while we're doing fine financially, it's irresponsible to keep funneling so much of our extra income to his parents. We need to start thinking about our own future, saving for kids, buying a home, making significant purchases down the line. At first, he seemed to understand where I was coming from, but before long, the conversation turned into an argument. He insisted that since we're living comfortably, why shouldn't we help his parents out with the extra money? It's not that I want to stop helping them altogether. I just think there needs to be a balance between supporting them and taking care of our own future. That's what I'm struggling with, finding that balance. Bobby, however, remains firm in his decision to keep supporting his parents financially, and it's driving a wedge between us. The situation has frustrated me to the point where I almost walked out during one of our arguments. My anger boiled over when I remembered how his parents treated me in the past. If they had ever made me feel like part of the family, maybe I could be more understanding. But they never accepted me. They weren't there for us when we needed them most. I can still remember when Bobby and I were just starting out, fresh out of college and barely making ends meet. We went to his parents, hoping for a little help to buy our first home, only to be met with cold refusal. They didn't even take a moment to consider our situation. Instead, we were lectured about adult responsibilities and how we needed to learn to save for ourselves. It was less about offering guidance and more about dismissing our struggles entirely. And now, years later, here we are, sending them money they don't even need, while Bobby refuses to see the bigger picture. Despite my frustrations, I don't know how to get through to him. I bit my tongue, choosing to keep my thoughts to myself. It was disheartening to see Bobby's parents so unwilling to help their own son, but I resigned myself to accept their decision if Bobby could make peace with it. However, the issue resurfaced about a year and a half ago when I inherited a house from my mother. It was a lovely property, but it needed major renovations. While we had saved some money, it wasn't nearly enough to cover the necessary repairs. This recurring pattern, needing financial assistance and being repeatedly rejected by Bobby's parents, who nonetheless had no issue asking us for money, began to strain how I viewed our relationship dynamics. The constant tug of war over finances exposed a painful imbalance. They were more than willing to take from us but refused to offer help when we needed it most. Faced with the challenge of making the inherited house livable, we decided to approach his parents again, hoping this time they might be willing to lend a modest sum. Unfortunately, they refused once more. This time, they told us to stop asking for their money and to figure things out on our own. They even suggested I sell the house, dismissing it as a waste of space and something that looks like crap. Their words cut deep. This house wasn't just a property to me. It was a cherished connection to my mother, filled with memories and sentimental value. I bit back my hurt and anger, thinking it would be impolite to react at the time, though part of me now wishes I had spoken up. Maybe if I had, their blatant disregard for our situation might not have been so bold. But instead, I chose to let it go. Determined not to let their rejection stop me, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I worked tirelessly, scraping together funds and poured every bit of my effort into the renovations. Slowly but surely, as I started earning more, the project became more manageable. After months of hard work, the house was completely transformed into something beautiful, a home I was incredibly proud of, a testament to my dedication. A few months later, I finally had the chance to show off what I had accomplished. I invited my in-laws over for dinner to celebrate my mother-in-law's birthday, and by that time, the house looked stunning. I was proud of all the hard work I had put into transforming it and hoped the evening would go smoothly. Typically, our family gatherings are peaceful as long as the conversation doesn't revolve around money, which is always a sensitive topic with them. When they arrived and saw the renovations, I could tell they were taken aback. Their eyes widened as soon as they stepped inside, clearly surprised by how much the house had changed. Internally, I felt a small sense of satisfaction, knowing they hadn't expected me to achieve such a dramatic transformation. They complimented the house profusely, which was flattering at first, but soon their praise began to feel overwhelming. They started inspecting every corner, asking detailed questions about how much everything had cost. At first, I tried to brush it off as natural curiosity. After all, they knew we hadn't had a lot of extra money to spare, and they hadn't contributed a dime to the renovations. But as their questions continued, it became clear their interest wasn't about admiring the hard work. I could feel them tallying up the expenses in their heads, trying to figure out exactly how much we had spent. It was intrusive, almost demeaning, as if the value of my efforts could only be measured by how much money we had poured into the project. The dinner itself started off well enough, with light, enjoyable conversation, but things quickly shifted when my mother-in-law brought up the subject of dream vacations. She asked me about my ideal getaway, but I could tell by her tone and her disinterested expression that she wasn't really listening. It felt like she was just waiting for me to finish speaking. Her sudden excitement after my brief response seemed forced, which only heightened my suspicions. And soon, the real reason for their visit emerged. They wanted us to help finance a vacation home. After years of refusing to help us when we needed it, here they were, asking us to contribute to a luxury they desired, a vacation home, no less. They were well off and more than capable of saving for it themselves, so why were they turning to us for help? It became clear that they had assumed, based on the renovations I had managed to complete, that we must be flush with cash. Nothing could have been further from the truth. When I asked them to explain why they needed a vacation home, their answer was simply that they were bored and wanted a change of scenery for weekends. I was shocked by their sense of entitlement. I calmly explained that we didn't have extra money to spare for something so extravagant, but then Bobby's reaction stunned me. He turned to me with a look of disbelief, as if I had just committed a terrible offense. "Spending on my parents' happiness is never a waste," he said coldly, his glare making it clear he didn't share my frustration at their request. I had to be careful with my words, though the situation left me baffled and hurt. Bobby's reaction highlighted a deeper issue in our relationship, our differing priorities and understanding of financial responsibility. Deep down, Bobby knew I was right. A vacation home was hardly a necessity, certainly not a matter of life and death. His father still had a job, and they could easily save up for such a luxury on their own. But instead of doing that, they seemed intent on having us finance their comfort. Then it hit me. Bobby wasn't an only child. He had an older brother, Jack. So why weren't they asking him for the money? When I brought this up, the mood in the room shifted, and I could feel the tension rise. It turned out they didn't want to burden Jack because he wasn't as financially stable, or so they claimed. He had children, they argued, and his expenses were focused on his family. I pointed out that Jack's financial situation wasn't all that different from ours. He earned about the same, but his money went toward his children. I mentioned that Bobby and I planned to start a family soon, and continually supporting his parents could jeopardize our ability to provide for our future kids. Their response was dismissive. Since we didn't have children yet, they argued we should have plenty of funds to spare. What followed was an onslaught of emotional manipulation, though it wasn't directed at me. They knew I wouldn't bend. Instead, they aimed their pleas at Bobby, lamenting their loneliness and boredom now that both of their sons were busy with their own lives. They painted the vacation home as a solution to their isolation, and Bobby, always the dutiful son, swayed by their emotional appeal. I found myself in a delicate situation, trying to navigate these increasingly fraught discussions without letting my in-laws realize they had backed us into a corner. But things took a drastic turn just a week ago. Bobby and I had the worst argument we've ever had. Though it never turned physical, his words cut deep. He told me that the $420,000 he planned to give his parents wasn't just mine to decide on. He claimed he had been considerate in the past by asking for my opinion, but no longer felt obligated to seek my approval. The argument hit its peak when he went ahead and transferred the money to his parents, without any further discussion with me. I only found out when my mother-in-law casually mentioned receiving the funds as if it were no big deal. I was furious, not just about the money, but about the blatant disrespect for our shared decision-making in our marriage. Bobby's secretive actions left me feeling deeply betrayed, sparking a fierce debate over our financial priorities and the respect we owed each other. He knew I opposed his decision, yet he went ahead and donated the entire $420,000 he had saved over the years to his parents, leaving us with nothing. When I confronted him and urged him to retrieve the funds, he dismissed me outright, insisting he would manage his relationship with his parents on his own. Despite my reminders that significant financial decisions should be made together, he wouldn't hear it. Our disagreements seemed to have worn him down. In the heat of our argument, he shockingly threatened me with divorce. He shouted that if I interfered with his choice to support his parents financially, he would leave me. The absurdity of it hit me hard. I had stood by him through every high and low, and now he was willing to abandon our marriage for the sake of his parents' desires over our shared future. I couldn't help but question whether he cared at all about the plans we had made together, building a life, having children, and finding happiness as a unit. It seemed to me that none of it mattered to him anymore. His focus was solely on fulfilling his parents' wishes while I felt neglected and sidelined. In a moment of anger, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. A week has passed since that day, and he hasn't come home. Despite my countless texts, calls, and voicemails, he continues to ignore me or leave me hanging. The hurt runs deep. I never imagined something like this could drive Bobby away. When I reached out to my in-laws, I discovered he had been staying with them since he left. He hasn't returned home even once. I'm overwhelmed with stress and confusion, grappling with the fear that our marriage could be ending over what feels like a trivial disagreement yet is so profound. As the days stretch into more than a week without Bobby, the uncertainty of our future looms heavily over me. I had reached a pivotal moment. Initially, I was hesitant, unsure if severing ties was truly the right decision. But the ongoing chaos, coupled with the blatant disregard from Bobby and his family, solidified my resolve. If Bobby was threatening divorce, then perhaps that was the inevitable path we were headed toward. So I took the initiative and contacted my lawyer that very morning. During our conversation, my lawyer laid out my options, not only regarding the divorce but also potential legal actions given the circumstances. As we spoke, another stark realization hit me. I no longer wanted to be tied down by the memories within the walls of the house my mother had left me. Once a symbol of her love, the house had become a constant reminder of the tumultuous times with Bobby. Determined to move forward, I made the decision to sell the house. It was entirely in my name, a final gift from my mother, which legally allowed me to sell it without Bobby's consent. The sale turned out to be quite profitable, providing me with the financial security I needed to navigate the legal proceedings ahead. The very next day, after finalizing the divorce papers, I had them sent to Bobby. I knew exactly when he received them because my phone rang almost immediately afterward. It was Bobby, furious, incredulous. He ranted about how absurd I was being, claiming he had been planning to file for divorce anyway. His shock only deepened when he learned about the legal actions I had already initiated. The call was heated, filled with accusations and disbelief, marking a clear turning point in what had become an irreparable rift. Bobby completely lost his temper during the conversation, and as his anger escalated, I realized I couldn't take it any longer. Midway through his tirade, I hung up on him. As the days led up to the court case, I was a bundle of nerves. My mind was flooded with worries about the potential outcomes. What if the court ruled against me? What if I ended up losing everything, including the money? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I knew I had to push through to see this to the end. Despite my fears about the future, I didn't allow them to overwhelm me. I dressed confidently, put on my best smile, and walked up to the courthouse, ready to face whatever lay ahead. It was the day of the final hearing for our divorce, and to my surprise, everything turned out incredibly well. Not only was I able to keep all the proceeds from the sale of the house, but the court also ordered Bobby to pay me a substantial amount in alimony, fulfilling his legal obligation. This outcome was unexpected, especially receiving more money from Bobby, but it felt justified given the emotional and mental toll his actions had taken on me. Accepting this money felt like a reclaiming of my dignity. The disapproval and shock on my in-laws' faces as the verdict was read brought me a sense of vindication. They likely never anticipated that their manipulation would backfire so severely. They had thought they could exert control over me without consequences, but instead, they ended up losing significantly. Since then, life has been relatively calm. I did receive a harsh call from my mother-in-law who criticized my actions, accusing me of selfishness and lacking the ability to care for others. She even went as far as to say I would never be able to start my own family. Despite her words, I've been able to move forward. I used the money from the house sale to secure a new apartment for myself, where I could finally save without the constant pressure and demands from others. However, a part of me still questions the measures I took. Was taking him to court too extreme? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, so please share your opinions in the comments below. The situation took a surprising turn, but I felt it was necessary under the circumstances. As I scrolled through the comment section of my latest post, the range of opinions was striking. Some commenters defended Bobby, questioning what was the big deal about giving his parents $420,000 if he had $550,000. On the other hand, many disagreed vehemently, supporting my perspective. They pointed out that we had been financially assisting his parents for years while trying to establish our own financial security and save for a house. The debate in the comments was clearly divided. A significant number criticized my decision to sell the house and keep the money, labeling it disrespectful, given that the house was legally in my name. However, about half of the commenters backed my actions, asserting that it was exactly what I needed to do in light of the circumstances. So let's open this up for further discussion. Drop your comments below, and let's dive deeper into this situation.
Greetings, I'm Jenny, aged 27. 3 years back, I tied the knot with Hugo, the most remarkable person I've ever met. He's a delightful goofball, overflowing with kindness and compassion, making each day feel extraordinary. Regrettably, the same sentiment doesn't extend to his mother, Maria, also known as my mother-in-law. For reasons unknown, Maria has harbored animosity toward me since day one, a sentiment I comprehend. After all, Hugo is her cherished son, and she's merely safeguarding his interests. However, I firmly believe she sometimes crosses the line. Maria has a knack for subtle injustices that seem innocent, but are actually calculated to incite frustration, painting you as the unreasonable one. We all have encountered someone like her. Unfortunately, she happens to be my mother-in-law. I was brought up differently. I'm inclined to call out nonsense and rarely hold back. Perhaps that's what drew Hugo to me. Our contrasting personalities attracting each other, as they say. Having studied psychology, I can discern Maria's ill intentions. Our dominant personalities clash, which likely led to her first words to me. "Jenny, don't you think it's time to stop eating so much?" The table fell silent, stunned. Mortification painted my face pale as Hugo Kyle, my father-in-law, and Maria's son, reacted. Hugo, though embarrassed, admonished his mother. "Mom, that's terrible to say. Jenny can eat as she pleases." Maria backpedaled, claiming concern for my well-being, citing old photos where I appeared better. Despite my embarrassment morphing into irritation, I kept calm, not wanting to cause a scene during our initial meeting. I graciously accepted her unsolicited advice. As time passed, such incidents increased in frequency and intensity. Despite bonding with everyone, Maria remained the sole dissenter, her disdain unfounded. Even Hugo's childhood friend, Kidak, embraced me. Yet Maria persisted, even on my wedding day, behaving like a bridezilla, trying to undermine me. "No, her hair should be in an updo like mine was. But you look so ugly." Maria's antics persisted, but amid the turmoil, I cherished the love and acceptance from the rest of Hugo's family. The gasps from the bridal party were audible, yet I found myself unsurprised, having grown accustomed to such situations. In an attempt to rectify her words, My mother-in-law hastily backtracked. "Oh no, darling, that's not what I meant. You have the potential to look so much better. I see a lot of myself in Jenny. She's a bright young woman. Despite looking better at her age, I'd like to say she's beautiful in her own way." While my father-in-law managed to quell her ruthless antics on that day, the lingering pain and bitterness persisted. It went against my nature to remain silent and passive. My vibrant energy was diminishing, drained by this woman who seemed determined to undermine me. Fast forward 3 years to the current events of our story. We gathered at Hugo's childhood home, his parents' residence, for dinner on a Sunday night. My mother-in-law had graciously invited us, including Jack, indicating something significant was afoot. I had my suspicions, which were later confirmed, making the dinner plan seem more calculated. As the evening unfolded, my mother-in-law seized everyone's attention, announcing an important revelation. Armed with a paper, she began reading. "Attention, everyone. I have an announcement. Since my birthday is approaching, I want to share my plans. We're going to Hawaii." The paper confirmed the trip, met with excitement from everyone at the table. "That sounds fantastic." "What? Amazing news, Jenny. I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. This is great news. I'm so excited. Thanks so much, Ma." "Actually, you're not coming." "Honey, what do you mean? This wasn't part of the plan." I made some last-minute changes and canceled her ticket before incurring extra charges. So, my ticket was already purchased, and she just canceled it. Why does she hate me so much? "Mom, what are you talking about?" In the ensuing chaos, Jack and I remained silent. Harsh words flew back and forth until Maria finally offered an explanation. Okay, fine. I'll tell you why I thought Jenny shouldn't join the family event. As I'm getting older, I want to spend my remaining years with those I care about most. Unfortunately, Jenny doesn't belong on that list. "Mom, really? What's wrong with you?" "Nothing's wrong with me. I'm just saying Jenny can't be considered family since she's not related by blood." By that logic, Jack shouldn't go either, right? He's not technically family, as you're stating. But we all know that's preposterous. He is part of the family. Since Hugo and Jenny got married, she's family too. Well, Jack is different. He's always been here, our sweet baby angel. But Jenny hasn't. I'm just not comfortable with her on the trip. It's my birthday, and I get to decide. "Come on, Jenny, we're leaving." My resolute no reverberated through the room, capturing everyone's attention, including my adversary, who had been struggling to contain a smile. However, her expression turned serious at once. "Maria, it's been evident from the start that you harbor disdain toward me. For 3 years, I've endured your unbearable behavior. Do you think we're blind to your actions? Do you believe we don't see your narcissism? Watch your tone, young lady. Remember, you're in my house. And it won't be for much longer. In fact, I'm about to leave. But before I go, there's something I need to say." I addressed my beloved husband, whose eyes burned with anger as he looked at his mother. "Darling, I love you completely, and I've tried to weather this storm for so long. But it's clear now that your mother will never embrace me into this family, no matter how hard I try or how often I hold my tongue. She'll always find fault with me. You should go on this trip. You can't miss it. Despite her quirks, she's still your mother, and you love her, and she loves you. So go. Don't worry about me. I'll manage." Turning to my mother-in-law, who appeared stunned by my words, I continued. "And as for you, unfortunately for you, I'm in love with your son, and I'm not going anywhere. You might think you can push me out, but I'm here to stay. Even in Hawaii, you'll be thinking of me because, let's be honest, I think you're fixated on me. How dare you? I ought to slap you right now. I'm not done. You're fixated on me, obsessed with tearing me down, and I can't fathom why when all I've done is extend kindness and patience, even when you didn't deserve it. But enough is enough. If you don't want me in Hawaii or consider me part of the family, fine. But I will always be here. As long as I breathe, I'll be here for Hugo, Kyle, and even Jack, but never for you. In that moment, I realized I had finally silenced her. She stood with her mouth agape, seemingly searching for words that her mind wouldn't allow. I bid farewell to the other family members, kissed my husband on the cheek, and headed towards the exit. "Let me drive you home, at least. I can't let you take a cab. Don't worry about me, babe. I love you, and thank you for loving me. But I'll be fine. You have a trip to discuss." "Okay, if you say you'll be fine, I'll believe you. Oh, don't forget your purse." "Right, my purse. I left it in the kitchen." Upon reaching the kitchen, where Maria had retreated, presumably to catch her breath after the altercation, I encountered her. "What do you want?" "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. I'm just here to collect my things." "Well, make it quick. I want you out of my house. I can't believe you said those things to me." With that, she swiftly stormed out, too filled with anger to see me off. In that moment, I scoffed at her absurdity, grabbed my purse, and noticed a piece of paper next to it. Assuming it was the trip itinerary, I grabbed it to sneak a peek at what I was missing. As I began to read, I discovered Maria's handwriting. "Dearest Jack, you've always been like a son to me, and I love you dearly." Oh, it's a letter to Jack. A bit strange, but I suppose it's thoughtful. For some reason, my curiosity led me to read further. "The love and care you've shown me throughout the years will never be forgotten. Regrettably, even in my son Hugo's case, I feel the love we once shared is no longer there." Wait, is she saying she loves Jack more than Hugo? That can't be right. Persisting in reading the letter, each line intensified my astonishment. The revelations were difficult to fathom. Although I recognized it wasn't my place to read the letter, I couldn't help but be grateful for stumbling upon it. After absorbing its entirety, I paced the kitchen, contemplating my next steps. Suddenly, it struck me. Everyone who needed to know about the letter was in that room. It was time to act. Rereading the letter to confirm its contents, I sauntered into the dining room, where only 3 pairs of eyes met mine. "Jenny, I am profoundly sorry for what my wife is subjecting you to. Don't worry at all. You're coming to Hawaii with us. She's just going through a rough patch right now. I'll talk to her and make her see reason. I don't know what's gotten into her, but I'll sort it out, I promise." "Kyle, please don't concern yourself with me. As I mentioned, I'm fine. In fact, I've stumbled upon some interesting news that I need to share with everyone, especially Hugo." Hugo and Jack perked up, a flash of worry crossing Hugo's face. Perhaps he feared I was overwhelmed and considering a divorce. Whenever I complained about his mother, he'd empathize, marveling at how I endured her antics. I'd reassure him it was my love for him that kept me going. Noticing Maria's absence, I inquired, "Where is Maria? She needs to be here for this too." I mentioned earlier, she's a bit under the weather after your confrontation. Mentioned the headache and opted for a nap upstairs. She won't be down for a while. You know how she is about her beauty sleep. Familiar with Maria's peculiar habits that often inconvenienced others, I sighed in frustration. This is crucial. She has to be here. "It's okay, Jenny. You can share with us, and we'll fill her in when she wakes up." Contemplating the information I possessed, I hesitated. I wanted to witness her embarrassment. "I think you should go ahead and tell us, sweetie. It's okay, and you know Hugo struggles with anxiety. It wouldn't be good to keep him waiting." True, Hugo's anxiety could escalate quickly, and I observed him beginning to fidget in anticipation. "All right, I'll share with you what I found." While I was in the kitchen, gathering my purse and preparing to leave, I stumbled upon something intriguing that I believe you all need to know about. Retrieving the paper I found, I began to read aloud. It reads, "Dearest Jack, you know that you have always been like a son to me, and you know that I love you dearly. And the love and care you have shown for me throughout the years will never be forgotten. I hate to admit it, but even when it comes to my son Hugo, I feel as though the love we once shared is no longer there. Hugo and I just don't see eye to eye like we used to, and honestly, I think it's because of Jenny. Ever since he married that girl, he no longer has time for me. He doesn't love me, and therefore, I don't think I love him. I love you and you are my son. With that being said, I want to let you know that I am going to update my will so that you inherit all of my belongings and not Hugo. I know it might hurt him, but honestly, at this point, I don't care. It's that wretched Ginny girl. She's the one who has poisoned my love for him. I hope you receive this letter well. The reason why I didn't want to approach you about it in person is that, and it pains me to admit this, I couldn't risk seeing the rejection on your face. I know you love Hugo like he's your brother, and most likely you won't approve. But I don't care. I'm giving you everything: the money, the house, the cars, and even my small businesses. They're all yours, whether you like it or not. If you want to talk about this further, please call me, and we can discuss it. I look forward to hearing your response. I will love you forever and always, your second mom. After finishing the letter, I glanced up to witness a flurry of mixed emotions. Kyle appeared on the verge of tears. Jack seemed stunned, but Hugo looked like he was on the brink of losing his temper. I can't believe she said all those things. Is she serious? So, she'd exclude me from her, well, just to spite me and Ginny? She's officially lost her mind, guys. I don't even know what to say. This has gone too far. I'm fed up with her toxic behavior. What are we going to do? In that moment, I had an idea. A week passed, and it was time for the planned Hawaii trip. Maria woke up to find a letter from her husband on her bedside table. It read, "Good morning, beautiful. We decided to let you catch up on your beauty sleep. Don't worry, your bags are packed. Just meet us at the airport." Maria hurriedly got ready and rushed to the airport, searching frantically for her travel companions. She tried calling them, but no one answered. Assuming they had already boarded, she boarded her flight, hoping to catch up with them in Hawaii. During the 12-hour flight, she landed and video called Kyle. "Hey, Kyle. Where are you guys? I woke up late and found your note, but none of you are answering. I assumed you boarded without me. Where are you? Let's start the festivities." "That won't be happening, Maria." "What do you mean? Where are you?" "I'm at home." "What? Why are you at home?" "You see, Maria, Ginny brought some important information to our attention last week, and since then, we decided we'd rather spend time in Florida with her than anywhere else with you." Maria gasped. "You think we wouldn't find out?" "What, my baby? Don't baby me. You were really going to cut me out of the will, Mom." Who? How did you even find out about that?" "Oh, that wretched girl you despise so much. Ginny found your letter in the kitchen." "I don't know what you're talking about, Maria. Lying right now is only adding more nails to the coffin. Jack, tell them. You've got to believe me. I did nothing of this sort." "We all read the letter, Maria. The game is up." But I didn't do anything. Ginny is making everything up." "Oh, am I? You are so pathetic. It actually makes me sick. We all know what you said and what you tried to do. Thank goodness I was nosy enough to read the whole thing. Hugo, Kyle, please." "No, Maria. Enough is enough. You're done. You don't get to say anything else. You messed up big time. Your hatred has caused you to be blind. Now you have to suffer the consequences of being alone on your birthday because of what you've done. I hope you can use this time in Hawaii to reflect on your actions. But I'll be alone. It won't be fun. Maybe people would like to hang out with you more if you weren't such a raging witch. Have fun." And with that, Kyle hung up the phone. We all let out a sigh of relief. I was the first person to start laughing, eventually joined by Hugo, and before we knew it, we were all bursting with laughter at the dining table, just laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation. The look on her face once she realized the game was up was priceless. Her face turned pale, all the blood drained from her face, and it was evident that it was the first time in a long time that she felt embarrassed. Maria had to spend her vacation alone, frequently calling Kyle to see if he would at least come and join her because canceling the reservations she made would be expensive. But every time he kept denying it, stating that when she comes back, they were going to have to implement some ground rules if she still wanted to be married to him. Maria began to be very apologetic and frantic, a complete 180 from her usual demeanor, which was genuinely surprising. Hugo also mentioned that if Maria still wanted to be in his life, she had to make a drastic change in her attitude. Otherwise, he was ready to walk out of her life forever. Their relationship remained rocky, and Hugo asserted that if Maria ever disrespected him again, even with the smallest snide remark, he would cut her off completely, just as she had planned for him. As for Jack, he decided it was best to stop being overly accommodating to Maria, as it was clearly enabling her toxic behavior. So, not only did Maria end up spending a miserable time in a beautiful place, but she also risked losing the 3 most important people in her life. She now has very strained relationships with all of them, and she has to change for the better. Regarding me, I messaged her, stating that I need time to decide if I'm going to forgive her for all of her injustices. She was apologetic and begged me to talk some sense into the men in her life. I refused, stating that this is the bed she made for herself, and now she has to lie in it. To this day, Maria is still attempting to mend the very broken relationships that she caused. I just hope she learned her lesson.
Cassie, when will you stop embarrassing this family? Mother's voice cuts through the morning calm like a knife. I stare defiantly over my coffee mug, heart pounding. I didn't realize existing was embarrassing. Don't be smart, Father snaps. Your sister manages to dress appropriately for family breakfast. Jocelyn shifts uncomfortably in her pressed blouse and slacks. I glance down at my paint-splattered overalls, of rebellion in denim. I came straight from a studio. I say, my art doesn't keep anchors hours. Mother's lips tighten. Art. Is that what you're calling those? Scribbles now. The words sting, but I refuse to let it show. My name is Cassandra Harlow, Cassie to the few who actually know me, and I'm suffocating in a family that can't see past their own expectations. They're good enough for the buyers at the gallery, I retort. Father scoffs. Buyers. As if anyone with taste would pay for that nonsense. Warren, Mother hisses, not at the table. But he's on a roll now. When are you going to grow up, Cassandra? Your sister's already making partner at her law firm. What do you have to show for yourself? I grip my mug tighter, knuckles white. I have my integrity. And my freedom. Freedom, he laughs bitterly. Is that what you call mooching off your parents at 28?
I pay rent, I grov.
For this overpriced closet you call a guest house. A pittance, Mother sniffs. Hardly covers the utilities. Jocelyn clears her throat. Maybe we could talk about something else? The weather's been lovely. Stay out of this. Father and I snap in unison. She shrinks back, and for a moment, I feel a pang of guilt. It's not her fault she's their golden child. I stand abruptly, chair scraping against the hardwood. I think I've lost my appetite. Sit down, Father commands. We're not finished. I say, heading for the door. Mother's voice follows me. This is why you'll never amount to anything, Cassandra. You can't even finish a simple family breakfast. I pause, hand on the doorknob. The urge to lash out, to hurt them as they've hurt me, is overwhelming. But I swallow it down. You're right, Mother. I can't finish this. Not anymore. I step out into the crisp morning air, letting the door slam behind me. The manicured lawn of the main house stretches before me, a perfect facade, hiding the rot beneath. I stride across it, grass staining my bare feet. My phone buzzes. A text from Jocelyn. I'm sorry. They shouldn't have said those things. I ignore it, shoving the phone back in my pocket. Her pity is almost worse than their scorn. The guest house, my prison for the past year, looms ahead. I'd moved back in after a bad breakup and an eviction notice, swallowing my pride for what I'd thought would be a few months at most. Now, it feels like quicksand slowly pulling me under. Inside, I survey the cramped space. Canvases line the walls, splashes of color defying the beige monotony my parents prefer. My latest piece sits on the easel, an abstract swirl of reds and blacks, emotion made visible. I grab my battered suitcase from the closet and start throwing clothes in haphazardly. Enough is enough. I can't keep suffocating here, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. A knock at the door interrupts my frenzied packing. Cassie, it's Jocelyn. Can we talk? I hesitate, then open the door. She takes in the suitcase, eyes widening. You're leaving? I have to. I say. I can't do this anymore, Jose. She nods slowly. I understand. But where will you go? I laugh, a bit hysterically. No idea. But anywhere's better than here. Jocelyn bites her lip. Let me help. I can lend you some money just to get started. No. I cut her off. I appreciate it, but I need to do this on my own. She looks hurt, but nods again. Okay, just promise you'll stay in touch. I soften slightly. It's not her fault she's the daughter they wanted. I promise. As I finish packing, Jocelyn hovers uncertainly. What should I tell them? I zip the suitcase closed with finality. Tell them I'm finally growing up. I shoulder my bag and grab my easel. Jocelyn follows me out, watching as I load everything into my beat-up Volkswagen. Be careful, she says as I slide into the driver's seat. I manage a small smile. Always am. As I pull out of the driveway, I catch a glimpse of my parents watching from the window. Their faces are a mixture of anger and disbelief. I lift my hand in a mock salute, then press down on the accelerator. The mansion shrinks in my rearview mirror, and with each mile, I feel the weight lifting from my chest. I have no idea where I'm going, but for the first time in years, I'm free. And that's worth more than all the approval in the world. The sun beats down on my neck as I adjust my easel, squinting at the canvas before me. It's been 3 weeks since I left home, and the local art fair is my first real attempt at making it on my own. My stomach churns with a mix of excitement and dread. Interesting use of color. A deep voice says behind me. I turn to see a man studying my latest piece, head tilted thoughtfully. Thanks, I reply, trying to gauge if he's being sincere or sarcastic. His rugged good looks are offset by grease-stained hands and well-worn jeans. Not exactly the typical art fair patron. He grins, disarming me completely. I mean it. The way you've captured light here, he points to a swirl of yellow and orange. It's like looking at a sunset through stained glass. I blink, surprised by his insight. That's exactly what I was going for. He extends a hand. I'm Rhett Lawson. Cassie Harlow, I say, shaking it. His grip is firm, calloused. So, Cassie Harlow, he says, tell me about this one. He gestures to a darker piece, all stormy blues and grays. I hesitate. It's deeply personal, painted during one of my lowest moments after leaving home. But something in Rhett's open expression makes me want to share. It's about feeling trapped, I explain. Like you're drowning in expectations that aren't your own. Rhett nods slowly. I get that. Family stuff. I laugh humorlessly. Is it that obvious? Let's just say I recognize the look, he says with a wry smile. So, what did you do to get out from under it? This, I say, gesturing to my paintings. I left, decided it was time to sink or swim on my own terms. Brave, Rhett says, and there's genuine admiration in his voice. We talk for hours, the rest of the fair fading into background noise. Rhett, it turns out, is a mechanic with a passion for restoring vintage cars. He describes engines the way I talk about color theory, with an enthusiasm that's infectious. As the fair winds down, Rhett helps me pack up my unsold pieces. So, he says casually, I was thinking of taking a drive up the coast tomorrow. There's this great little seafood shack about 2 hours north. Want to come? I hesitate. It's impulsive, maybe even reckless. But isn't that what I wanted when I left home? To take chances, to live freely? You know what? Yeah, I say, surprising myself. I'd love to. Rhett's face lights up. Great. I'll pick you up at 10. The next morning, I'm waiting outside my cheap motel room when Rhett pulls up in a gleaming 1967 Mustang convertible. My jaw drops. You like? He asks, patting the hood affectionately. It's gorgeous. I breathe, running a hand along the smooth paint. Restore her myself, Rhett says proudly. Hop in? We cruise up the coast, wind whipping through my hair. Rhett keeps me laughing with stories of disastrous first dates and entitled customers. For the first time in years, I feel truly relaxed. The seafood shack lives up to Rhett's praise. We devour fresh crab cakes and clam chowder at a weathered picnic table overlooking the ocean. "So," Rhett says, wiping his mouth, "what's next for you? After the fair, I mean." I shrug, suddenly self-conscious. Honestly, I have no idea. I've got enough saved to last a couple months. But after that, I trail off, the reality of my situation sinking in. Rhett nods thoughtfully. "You know, my mom runs this little gallery in town. Nothing fancy, but she's always looking for fresh talent. Want me to put in a word?" I stare at him, torn between gratitude and pride. "That's really kind of you, but I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Rhett insists. "Your work is good, Cassie. Really good. Mom's got a great eye. If she likes what she sees, it's because you deserve it." I bite my lip, considering. It's a lifeline, a chance to actually make this crazy dream work. "Okay," I say finally. "If she's interested, I'd love to meet her." Rhett grins. "Great. I'll set it up." As we drive back, the sun setting in a blaze of color that puts my paintings to shame, I feel a spark of hope ignite in my chest. For the first time since I left home, the future doesn't seem quite so daunting. We pull up to my motel, and Rhett kills the engine. There's a moment of charged silence. "I had a really great time today," I say softly. "Me too," Rhett replies. He leans in and I meet him halfway. The kiss is gentle, tentative at first, then deepens. When we finally break apart, we're both a little breathless. "So," Rhett says, a mischievous glint in his eye, "what do you say we make this a regular thing?" "The road trips, I mean," he adds hastily. "Although, the kissing part was pretty great too." I laugh, feeling lighter than I have in years. "I'd like that," I say. "Both parts." As I watch Rhett drive away, I realize I've taken my first real step towards independence. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Whatever comes next, I know I'm ready to face it head on. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Rhett and I sit on a checkered blanket, the remains of our picnic scattered around us. 6 months have passed since that first road trip, and every day has been an adventure. "Cassie," Rhett says, his voice uncharacteristically serious, "these past months have been the happiest of my life." I turn to him, smiling. "Mine too." He takes a deep breath, reaching into his pocket. "I know it might seem fast, but when you know, right?" He pulls out a small velvet box, and my heart skips a beat. "Cassandra Harlow, will you marry me?" The ring inside is simple but beautiful, a delicate silver band with a small, sparkling diamond. It's nothing like the gaudy rocks my mother always fawned over, and I love it all the more for that. "Yes," I breathe, tears pricking my eyes. "Yes, of course I will." Rhett's face breaks into a radiant grin as he slips the ring onto my finger. We kiss as the last rays of sunlight fade, wrapped in the warmth of our shared joy. Reality crashes back the next morning as I stare at my phone, thumb hovering over my parents' number. I have to tell them, but the thought makes my stomach churn. "You don't have to do this," Rhett says, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I lean into his embrace. "I do. They're still my family, even if..." I trail off, unable to finish the thought. "I'll be right here," he promises. Taking a deep breath, I hit call. Mother answers on the third ring. "Cassandra? Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Mother," I say, steeling myself. "I have news. I'm engaged." There's a long pause. "I see," she says finally, her voice tight. "And who is the lucky man?" "His name is Rhett. He's a mechanic, specializes in vintage car restoration." Another pause, longer this time. "A mechanic," she repeats flatly. "Cassandra, surely you can't be serious." "I am," I say, my resolve strengthening. "We'd like you to meet him. Maybe we could come for dinner next week." I can practically hear her internal struggle. Finally, she sighs. "I suppose that would be acceptable. Wednesday at 7. The week drags by, a mix of anticipation and dread. Rhett remains steadfast, his quiet confidence bolstering my own. When Wednesday arrives, we pull up to my parents' house in Rhett's prized Mustang. "Ready?" he asks, squeezing my hand. I nod, not trusting myself to speak. Mother answers the door, her smile brittle. "Cassandra. And you must be Rhett. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Harlow," Rhett says warmly, extending his hand. She shakes it briefly, her nose wrinkling slightly at the lingering traces of motor oil. "Come in, please." Father and Jocelyn are waiting in the living room. Jocelyn hugs me tightly, whispering congratulations in my ear. Father merely nods, his expression unreadable. Dinner is a tense affair. Mother peppers Rhett with questions about his background and education, each answer clearly disappointing her. Father remains mostly silent, watching Rhett with narrowed eyes. "So, Rhett," he finally says as dessert is served, "what are your intentions with my daughter?" Rhett meets his gaze steadily. "To love her, support her dreams, and build a life together." Father scoffs.
Noble sentiment.
"But how do you intend to provide for her? Surely you don't expect her to live on a mechanic's salary." "Dad," I interject, anger flaring. "I can provide for myself. My art." "Your art," he cuts me off dismissively. "Cassandra, it's time to be realistic. This dalliance has gone on long enough."
Dalliance.
I repeat, incredulous. "We're getting married." "No," Father says firmly. "You're not. I forbid it." The room falls silent. Even Mother looks shocked. "You forbid it?" I say, my voice dangerously quiet. "I'm not a child, Dad. You don't get to forbid anything. As long as you're part of this family, then maybe I don't want to be part of this family," I shout, standing abruptly.
Come on, Rhett.
"We're leaving." Rhett rises, his face a mask of calm. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. and Mrs.
Harlow."
I'm sorry we couldn't find common ground." As we head for the door, Jocelyn catches my arm. "Cassie, wait. They'll come around. Just give them time." I shake my head, tears threatening to spill. "I've given them my whole life, Jose. I can't do it anymore." Outside, I collapse against the car, sobs racking my body. Rhett holds me close, murmuring soothing words. "I'm so sorry," I choke out. "You didn't deserve that." He tilts my chin up, his eyes full of love. "Hey, none of that. I knew what I was signing up for, remember? We're in this together." As we drive away, I feel a strange mix of grief and liberation. The bridge to my old life is burning, but ahead lies a future full of possibility, one I get to shape with my own hands. "So," Rhett says, a hint of his usual humor returning. "Wanna elope?" I laugh through my tears, the weight on my chest easing slightly. "You know what? That doesn't sound half bad." As the lights of my childhood home fade in the rearview mirror, I realize I've made my choice. Whatever comes next, Rhett and I will face it together, on our own terms. The key scrapes in a lock as Rhett and I stumble into our new loft, arms laden with boxes. Sunlight streams through the large windows, illuminating the dusty hardwood floors and exposed brick walls. "Home sweet home," Rhett says, dropping a box with a grunt. I spin slowly, taking it all in. It's small, rough around the edges, and absolutely perfect. "I can't believe we did it," I breathe. Rhett wraps his arms around me from behind. "Believe it, babe. This is our fresh start." We spend the day unpacking, transforming the empty space into something uniquely ours. My easel claims a corner by the window, while Rhett's vintage car posters add character to the bare walls. By nightfall, we collapse onto our secondhand couch, exhausted but exhilarated. "To new beginnings," Rhett says, clinking his beer bottle against mine. "And to telling convention to shove it," I add with a grin. The next few weeks are a whirlwind of activity. Rhett throws himself into getting his restoration shop up and running, working long hours to transform an old garage into his dream workspace. I set up an online store for my art, nervously listing my first few pieces. "You're sure about the prices?" I ask Rhett for the 100th time, hovering over the publish button. He kisses my forehead. Your work is worth every penny, Cass. Trust yourself. Taking a deep breath, I click publish. It feels like sending a piece of my soul out into the world. Days pass with no sales, and doubt begins to creep in. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe this is all just a pipe dream. I throw myself into painting, channeling my frustration onto canvas. One morning, I wake to Rhett shaking me excitedly. Cassie, wake up. You've got to see this. I blink groggily at the laptop screen he's thrust in front of me. It takes a moment for the numbers to register. Wait, is that? You sold 3 paintings overnight. Brett, whoops. And look at the comments. They love your work. Tears spring to my eyes as I read the glowing reviews. It's not just the money, though that's certainly welcome. It's the validation, the proof that my art speaks to people. I told you, Rhett says softly, pulling me close. You're amazing, Cass. The sales continue steadily over the next few months. I expand my online presence, even landing a few commissions. Meanwhile, Rhett's shop gains a reputation for quality work, attracting a loyal clientele of classic car enthusiasts. One evening, as we're celebrating another successful week, my phone buzzes. It's a text from Jocelyn. Can we talk? It's important. My stomach twists. I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that disastrous dinner. Part of me wants to ignore it to protect the life Rhett and I have built. But curiosity wins out. Hey, Jose, I say when she picks up. What's going on? Her voice is strained. It's Dad. There's been a scandal at the university. He's been forced to resign. The news hits me like a punch to the gut. Despite everything, I never imagined my father's carefully constructed world crumbling. What happened? Jocelyn hesitates. It's complicated. Financial improprieties, abuse of power. It's all over the local news. I sink onto the couch, mind reeling. Rhett sits beside me, concern etched on his face. How are Mom and Dad handling it? I ask, though I can already guess the answer. Not well, Jocelyn sighs. Mom's a wreck, and Dad.
He's not the man we knew, Cass.
They're going to lose the house. Everything. A part of me, a petty, wounded part, wants to feel satisfied. Isn't this karma for how they treated me? But the larger part aches for my family, for the pain they must be going through. What do you need from me, Jose? I ask quietly. She takes a shaky breath. I hate to ask, but could you come see them? They won't admit it, but I think they need you. I close my eyes, conflicting emotions warring within me. Rhett squeezes my hand supportively, and I draw strength from his presence. I'll think about it. I say finally. I can't promise anything, but I'll think about it. After I hang up, I fill Rhett in on the situation. He listens without judgment, his steady presence a balm to my churning thoughts. Whatever you decide, he says when I finish, I'm with you. If you want to see them, we'll go together. If you want to stay away, I'll support that too. I lean into him, grateful beyond words for his unwavering support. I don't know what to do, I admit. Part of me wants to help, but another part is terrified of getting sucked back into their world. Rhett nods thoughtfully. You don't have to decide right now.
Sleep on it.
Whatever choice you make, it'll be the right one for you. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I realize that this is the true test of the independence I've fought so hard for. The choice to help or not is mine alone, not dictated by obligation or fear, but by my own values and desires. Whatever I decide, I know it will shape the next chapter of my life. And for the first time, I feel truly ready to write that chapter on my own terms. The sharp knock at the door jolts me from my painting trance. I glance at the clock, 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Rhett's at the shop, and we're not expecting anyone. I open the door to find Jocelyn standing there, looking like she hasn't slept in days. Her usually immaculate suit is wrinkled, her hair disheveled.
Jess?
I say, stunned. What are you doing here? She pushes past me into the loft, her eyes darting around wildly. Nice place, she says, her voice brittle. Very bohemian. Thanks, I reply cautiously. Jocelyn, what's going on? You look terrible. She laughs, a harsh, humorless sound. Oh, you haven't heard? I thought surely it would have reached your artistic circles by now. My stomach tightens. Heard what? Jocelyn collapses onto our couch, suddenly looking very small. It's Dad, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. He's been fired from the university. There's a huge scandal. The news hits me like a physical blow. I sink down next to her, mind reeling. What happened? Financial improprieties, Jocelyn says, her voice hollow. Embezzlement, kickbacks from contractors. It's all over the news. They're saying he could face criminal charges. I struggle to reconcile this information with the image of my father, stern, principled, always lecturing us about integrity. I don't understand. Why would he do that? Jocelyn shakes her head. I don't know. Greed? Desperation? He's not talking to anyone, not even Mom. How is she taking it? How do you think? Jocelyn snaps. Her whole world is crumbling. The country club set she was so desperate to impress? They've all turned their backs on her. We're going to lose the house, Cassie. Everything. The weight of it all settles on me. Despite everything, a part of me aches for them. I'm so sorry, Jose. Is there anything I can do? She looks at me, eyes suddenly sharp. Actually, yes. That's why I'm here. I tense, sensing what's coming. They need help, Cass, Jocelyn pleads. Financial help. I've done what I can, but with the legal fees and everything else, it's not enough. I stand abruptly, pacing the small space. Jose, I don't know if I can do that. Can't or won't, she challenges. Both. I explode. Do you have any idea what it's been like, building this life from scratch? Every penny I make goes back into my art or our living expenses. And even if I could afford it, after everything they've put me through, Jocelyn's eyes flash. So that's it? You're just going to abandon them when they need you most. Abandon them? I repeat incredulously. Like they abandoned me when I chose to follow my passion? When I fell in love with someone they deemed unworthy? That's different, Jocelyn argues weakly. Is it? I counter. They made their choices, Jose, just like I made mine. We glare at each other, years of unspoken resentment bubbling to the surface. Finally, Jocelyn deflates. I'm sorry, she says softly. I shouldn't have come here demanding things. I don't know what to do, Cass. I feel like I'm drowning. My anger fades, replaced by a complicated mix of empathy and wariness. I sit back down, taking her hand. I get it. Really, I do. But I can't just write a check and make this all go away. Jocelyn nods, looking defeated. I understand. I should go. As she stands to leave, a thought strikes me. Wait, I say. I can't give you money, but maybe I could talk to them? Try to help them figure out their next steps. Hope flickers in Jocelyn's eyes. You do that. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. Yeah, I think I need to, for my own closure if nothing else. Jocelyn hugs me tightly.
Thank you, Cass.
You have no idea what this means. After she leaves, I sink back onto the couch, emotions swirling. When Rhett comes home, I fill him in on everything. Wow, he says when I finish. That's a lot to process. How are you feeling about it all? I laugh humorlessly. Honestly, I have no idea. Part of me wants to help them, to be the bigger person. But another part is scared of getting sucked back in, Rhett finishes. I nod, grateful for his understanding. He pulls me close. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But Cass, don't let guilt drive your choices. You've worked too hard for this life to throw it away out of obligation. I lean into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. I know. I think I need to see them, to understand what happened, and maybe find some closure. But I'm not going to sacrifice everything we've built. I can't. Rhett kisses my forehead. That sounds like a good plan. Want me to come with you? I consider it, then shake my head. No, I think this is something I need to do on my own. But thank you for offering. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I realized that this visit could change everything. Will seeing my parents in their fallen state bring resolution or open old wounds? Can I find a way to help without compromising my own hard-won independence? Whatever happens, I know this confrontation has been a long time coming, and for better or worse, it will shape the next chapter of all our lives. The elevator creaks ominously as it ascends to the 5th floor of a rundown apartment building. I take a deep breath, steeling myself for what's to come. The doors open, revealing a dimly lit hallway with peeling wallpaper. This is a far cry from the pristine mansion I grew up in. I find the right door and knock, my heart pounding. There's a long pause before I hear shuffling footsteps. The door opens a crack, and I see my mother's face, pale and drawn. "Cassandra," she says, surprise evident in her voice. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Mother," I reply, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jocelyn told me what happened. I thought I should come see you." She hesitates, then opens the door wider.
Como isso was?
The apartment is small and cluttered, nothing like the meticulously decorated home I remember. Dad sits in a threadbare armchair, staring blankly at a muted TV. He doesn't look up as I enter. "Warren," Mother says sharply. "Cassandra's here." He grunts, finally turning to face me. The man before me is a shadow of the imposing figure from my childhood. His eyes are sunken, his clothes rumpled. "Come to gloat, have you?" he says bitterly. I flinch at his tone.
No, Dad.
"I came to see if you're okay." He laughs humorlessly. "Okay? We've lost everything. My career, our home, our reputation, all gone. And now you show up, playing the concerned daughter?" "I am concerned," I insist. "You're still my parents, despite everything." Mother bustles around, clearing papers off a small couch. "Sit down, Cassandra. Would you like some tea?" I nod, grateful for the momentary distraction. As she disappears into the kitchenette, I take a seat, acutely aware of Dad's glare. "So," I say, desperate to break the tension, "have you thought about what you're going to do next?" Dad scoffs. "Do? What can we do? I'm radioactive in academia now. Your mother's little society friends won't even return her calls. We're finished." His defeatist attitude grates on me. "You're not finished. You're just starting over." "Easy for you to say," he snaps. "You chose this life of struggle. We had everything, and now you know what it's like to live without a safety net," I finish. "Like I've been doing since I left." Mother returns with the tea, her hands shaking slightly as she sets down the tray. "Let's not argue," she pleads. "Cassandra, tell us about your life. Are you managing all right?" I see the real question in her eyes. "Are you here to help us?" The realization sends a chill through me. Is that all I am to them now? A potential lifeline? "I'm doing well," I say carefully. "My art is selling, and Rhett's business is taking off." "Ah yes, the mechanic," Dad mutters. I ignore the jab. "We're building a life together. It's not always easy, but it's ours." Mother nods, a forced smile on her face. "That's lovely, dear. And have you given any thought to, well, family obligations? Now that we're in this difficult situation." And there it is, the request I've been dreading. I set down my teacup, my resolve hardening. "I can't give you money," I say firmly. "Even if I could afford it, which I can't, it wouldn't solve the underlying problems." Dad's face darkens. "So, you'll abandon us in our time of need? After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done for me?" I repeat incredulously. "You mean criticizing every choice I've made? Trying to force me into a life I never wanted?" "We wanted what was best for you," Mother interjects. "No," I say, my voice rising. "You wanted what was best for your image. You never once asked what I wanted." Dad stands abruptly, looming over me. "We gave you every advantage, and this is how you repay us? By turning your back when we need you most." I stand too, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not turning my back. I'm here, aren't I? But I won't enable you to avoid taking responsibility for your actions." "Responsibility," he roars. "You ungrateful." "Enough," Mother cries, tears in her eyes. "Please, both of you, stop this." We fall silent, the air thick with tension. I take a deep breath, trying to center myself. "Look," I say more calmly, I can't give you money, but I want to help. I can help you look for jobs or find resources for people in your situation. But you have to be willing to start over, to rebuild. Dad slumps back into his chair, suddenly looking very old. What's the point? He mutters. I kneel beside him, taking his hand. It's the first time we've touched in years. The point is that you're still here. You still have each other and Jocelyn
And me.
if you want. Mother joins us, her hand on Dad's shoulder. Perhaps Cassandra is right, Warren. We can't go back, but we can go forward. He looks at me, really looks at me for what feels like the first time. You've grown up, he says softly. When did that happen? I smile sadly. While you weren't looking. As I leave the apartment an hour later, I feel drained but oddly hopeful. It's not a fairy tale reconciliation, but it's a start. A chance to build a new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than expectations. I step out into the fading sunlight, taking a deep breath of the city air. Whatever comes next, I know I can face it. I've found my strength, my voice, and no one can take that away from me. The tension in the small apartment is palpable as I stand facing my parents. What started as a tentative attempt at reconciliation has devolved into a bitter confrontation. Mother's face is flushed with anger, while Dad glowers from his armchair. How can you be so heartless, Cassandra? Mother demands, her voice shrill. After everything we've done for you, you'd abandon us in our time of need? I take a deep breath, fighting to keep my composure. I'm not abandoning you. I've offered to help you find resources, to support you emotionally. But I can't just write a check and make this all go away. Support us emotionally?
Dad scoffs.
What good is that when we're about to be evicted? Maybe if you'd supported me emotionally all these years, things would be different now. I retort, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. Mother gasps, how dare you? We gave you everything. Everything except acceptance, I say, my voice rising. Everything except the freedom to be myself. Oh, here we go again with the artist nonsense, Dad mutters. Something inside me snaps. It's not nonsense. It's who I am, who I've always been. But you were too busy trying to mold me into your perfect daughter to see that. We wanted what was best for you. Mother cries. No. I counter, years of hurt pouring out. You wanted what was best for your image. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in this house? The constant criticism, the impossible standards. They stare at me, stunned by my outburst. Every time I showed you a painting, you asked why I couldn't be more like Jocelyn. I continue, unable to stop now that the floodgates have opened. Every accomplishment was met with, that's nice, but when are you going to do something real with your life?
Do you know what that does to a child?
Dad starts to speak, but I cut him off. And now that your carefully constructed world has crumbled, you expect me to swoop in and save you? To sacrifice the life I've built, the happiness I've found, to prop up your pride? We're parents, Mother says weakly. Yes, you are. I acknowledge, my voice softening slightly. And I love you, but I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. The silence that follows is deafening. Mother sinks onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. Dad stares at the floor, his jaw clenched. I never realized, he says finally, his voice barely above a whisper. We thought we were pushing you to be your best self. Your version of my best self. I correct gently. Not mine. Mother looks up at me, really looks at me, perhaps for the first time in years. You've grown so strong, she says, a mix of pride and regret in her voice. When did that happen? It happened when I stopped trying to be who you wanted me to be and started being true to myself. I reply. Dad clears his throat. And this life you've built, with the mechanic, you're truly happy. I nod, a small smile playing at my lips. Happier than I've ever been. Rhett sees me, the real me. He supports my dreams without trying to change them. I suppose we owe him an apology, Mother says quietly. You owe a lot of people apologies, I say, but without malice, including yourselves. They exchange a look, years of shared history passing between them. We've made a mess of things, haven't we? Dad says ruefully. I sit down between them, taking each of their hands in mine. Yes, you have. But it's not too late to start fixing it.
How?
Mother asks, her voice small and uncertain. By taking responsibility for your actions, I say firmly, by rebuilding your lives on a foundation of honesty and humility instead of pride and appearances. Dad nods slowly. It won't be easy. No, I agree. It won't. But I'll be here to support you if you'll let me. Not financially, but as your daughter. As someone who loves you, flaws and all. Mother squeezes my hand. We don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, I say. But I'm offering it anyway. Because that's who I am, the person I've become despite everything. For the first time in years, I see a glimmer of genuine pride in their eyes, not for what I've accomplished, but for who I am. We have a lot to learn from you, Cassandra, Dad says softly. I stand, feeling lighter than I have in years. It's not too late to start. As I leave the apartment, I feel a sense of closure I never thought possible. The road ahead won't be easy for any of us, but for the first time, I feel like we might be able to walk it together as equals. I step out into the fading sunlight, taking a deep breath of the city air. Whatever comes next, I know I can face it. I've found my strength, my voice. And in doing so, I may have finally helped my parents find theirs. The future is uncertain, but it's ours to shape. And for the first time in my life, I'm truly excited to see what it holds. The crisp autumn air carries the scent of possibility as I stand before the newly expanded Lawson's Vintage Restorations. Rhett's dream has grown, and with it, a space for my own aspirations to flourish. The storefront gleams, half filled with lovingly restored classic cars, the other half transformed into a cozy art gallery showcasing my work. Ready for this? Rhett asks, squeezing my hand. I take a deep breath, nodding. As I'll ever be. The grand opening is a whirlwind of faces, friends, fellow artists, car enthusiasts, and curious locals. I float between conversations, my heart swelling with pride at the admiring glances cast at both the vehicles and my paintings. This is incredible, Cassie, a familiar voice says behind me. I turn to see Jocelyn, looking slightly out of place in her tailored suit but smiling genuinely.
Just...
I exclaim, pulling her into a hug. I'm so glad you could make it. She steps back, taking in the gallery. I wouldn't have missed it. Your work, it's beautiful. I never really understood before, but now I see what you've been trying to tell us all along. Her words bring unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you. I manage. That means more than you know. Jocelyn's expression turns serious. Listen, I wanted to apologize.
For everything.
For not standing up for you more, for buying into Mom and Dad's expectations. I shake my head, cutting her off. You don't need to apologize. We were both just trying to survive in that house, in our own ways. She nods, looking relieved. How are they doing? Mom and Dad, I mean. I know you've been in touch more than I have lately. I consider my words carefully. They're
trying.
It's not easy, but they're making an effort to rebuild their lives, to see things differently. Dad's even talking about volunteering at a community college, teaching a night class. Wow, Jocelyn says, clearly surprised. That's not what I expected. Me neither, I admit. But I think losing everything forced them to reevaluate what really matters. Our conversation is interrupted by Rhett's mother, Evelyn, bustling over with a tray of champagne flutes. Girls, you must have a toast. This is a celebration after all. We accept the glasses, and Evelyn pulls me into a warm hug. I'm so proud of you both, she says, her eyes shining. You've built something truly special here. As she moves on to mingle with other guests, Jocelyn raises an eyebrow. She seems lovely. She is, I say, a wave of gratitude washing over me. She's been more of a mother to me these past few years than... I trail off, not wanting to reopen old wounds. Jocelyn nods in understanding. I'm glad you found that support, Cass. You deserve it. The evening progresses, a steady stream of well-wishers and potential clients flowing through the doors. As things begin to wind down, Rhett joins me by my favorite painting, a swirling abstract that somehow captures both the freedom of the open road and the comfort of coming home. "Quite a night, huh?" he says, wrapping an arm around my waist. I lean into him, exhausted but elated. "It's more than I ever dreamed possible." He kisses the top of my head. "You made it happen, Cass. Your talent, your determination, that's what brought us here." "We made it happen," I correct him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you believing in me." As the last guests trickle out, Jocelyn approaches us again. "I should get going," she says. "But before I do, Mom and Dad asked me to give you this." She hands me an envelope. With trembling fingers, I open it to find a card. Inside, in my father's precise handwriting, is a simple message. "Cassandra, we are so proud of the woman you've become and the life you've built. We were wrong to try to change you, and we're sorry it took us so long to see that. If you're willing, we'd like to start over, to get to know the real you, and to be the parents you always deserved. With love and admiration, Mom and Dad." Tears blur my vision as I pass the card to Rhett. He reads it silently, then pulls me close. "What do you think?" he asks gently. I take a shaky breath. I think it's a start. A real one this time. Jocelyn smiles, looking relieved.
They really mean it, Cass.
They've changed, or at least they're trying to. I nod, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me. Tell them I'd like that. To start over. As Jocelyn leaves, Rhett and I stand in the quiet gallery, surrounded by the fruits of our labor and love. "So," he says, a mischievous glint in his eye, "what's next for us, Cassandra Harlow soon-to-be Lawson?" I laugh, feeling lighter than I have in years. "I don't know exactly, but for the first time in my life, I'm excited to find out." We step outside, locking up our new shared space. The street is quiet, the city winding down for the night. But for us, it feels like a new dawn. As we walk hand in hand towards our loft, I realize that this moment, this life we've built, is the masterpiece I've been working towards all along. It's not perfect, it's not what anyone else planned for me, but it's beautifully, authentically mine. And that I now know is worth more than all the approval in the world.